Please all rise for the singing of the Philippine National Anthem, to be followed by the Japanese National Anthem.
Bayang magiliw, perlas ng silanganan, hanap ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay.
Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting.
Sa manlulupi, di ka pasisingil.
Sa dagat ang putok, sa simoy at sa langit mong lugaw. May dilag ang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal.
Ang iskap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagdidingding.
Ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidilim.
Tumanang araw na walhangin magsimba. Buhay ay langit sa bino. Bino ang ligaya na may bahagi.
Mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Please be seated. All right. To our speakers and guests from the government, the military, the academe, the diplomatic community, and the media, good morning. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat at Ohayo gozaimasu. I am Joyce Reyes, and I will be your host for today's forum on safeguarding the maritime domain for the free and open Indo-Pacific. Now, this forum is organized by the Strat-Based Institute in partnership with the Japan Institute of International Affairs. This is also a hybrid event, so thank you very much for joining us here this morning. And thank you very much as well to everyone who's joining us online via Facebook Live and via Zoom. As we know, the Indo-Pacific is more than just a geographic region. It is a community bound by the seas, an integrated system that anchors not just our security, but also our economic resilience, energy transition, and digital connectivity. And with the ongoing threats around us, safeguarding this maritime domain now more than ever has become an essential condition for regional peace and stability. Coincidentally, this year also marks the 10th year of the Free and Open Indo-Pacific, or FOIP, concept, first advanced by former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. At its core, FOIP rests on two core principles: defense of freedom and openness, principles sustained only through a rules-based order. Now, in the face of emerging risks, our agenda is clear: to develop effective strategies grounded in close collaboration with our partners, ensuring that the Indo-Pacific remains secure, resilient, and free. And that is why we are all gathered here this morning. But before we proceed, we have a lot of very comprehensive and insightful discussion in store for everyone. But before we proceed, we would like to acknowledge first the presence of notable leaders and partners who are joining us this morning. All right, so from the diplomatic community, allow me to recognize the acting ambassador of United States to the Philippines, Mr. Robert Ewing. Welcome, sir. Also with us today is the Deputy Ambassador of Australia to the Philippines, Mr. Nicholas Kay. And also the Deputy Head of Mission of Switzerland to the Philippines, Dr. Hans Christian Baumann. And all right, from from the government, we have with us today Deputy Director General Nestor Jerico from the National Security Council. Thank you for joining us, sir. And also Assistant Director General Cornelio Valencia Jr., spokesperson and Assistant Director General for Planning and Knowledge Management of the National Security Council. And we also have with us representatives from the Department of Foreign Affairs. So thank you very much for joining us this morning. We also have representatives from the military and Philippine Coast Guard. Allow me to also welcome the Commander of the Coast Guard Internal Audit, Rear Admiral Mitzi Silva Ocampo. Welcome, ma'am. The former Commander, Naval Education and Training Command, Rear Admiral Renan Suarez. Thank you, sir. And of course, the spokesperson of the Philippine Coast Guard, Admiral J. Tariela. Thank you, sir. And we also have representatives from the Philippine fleet all the way from Subic. Let's all welcome them as well. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. All right, and we also have with us today former Trade Secretary Alfredo Pascual. Thank you for joining us, sir. All right, and we also have the Ambassador of Sweden to the Philippines, Her Excellency Anna Ferry. Thank you for joining us, ma'am. All right, and to set the tone for today's discussion, allow me to call on the President of the Strat-Based Institute, Professor Victor Andres Dindo Manhit. Let's give him a round of applause, please.
Good morning, everyone. Guests, friends, networks, thank you. Friends from media, also. You know, the Indo-Pacific is defined by the seas. They carry the trade that sustains our economies, the energy that powers our industries, and the digital infrastructure that connects our societies. The maritime domain is therefore not only a geographic space, it is the foundation of regional stability, economic resilience, and global prosperity. But the seas are also where the rules that govern a region are increasingly being tested. Today, now nowhere is that test more visible than the West Philippine Sea. In 2025 alone, the Philippine Coast Guard West Philippine Sea Transparency Group documented 64 Philippine missions or activities subjected to illegal, coercive, aggressive, and deceptive actions. Some of these encounters even resulted in damaged assets, injuries to Filipino personnel, and fisherfolks, placing lives at risk and endangering the safety of those lawfully operating in our waters. And let me emphasize, these are only the incidents that were reported and made public. Far from the cameras and the headlines, many more acts of intimidation occur at sea, often involving Filipino fishermen and frontline personnel who continue to operate under constant pressure and uncertainty. What we are witnessing is not a series of isolated encounters, it is a clear and escalating pattern of coercion. The growing frequency and intensity of these incidents are deeply alarming. Such behavior, as we have stressed time and again, in our institutes, programs, activities, statements, should not and cannot be normalized or tolerated. It must be met with firm, coordinated, and decisive measures to end this persistent pattern of coercion. What happens in the West Philippine Sea will inevitably shape the strategic environment across the region. This is why the issue before us is not solely a Philippine concern. It is regional and a global one. Safeguarding the maritime domain is not simply about defending territory. It is about defending the principles that allows nations, large and small, to coexist peacefully, respect international law, freedom of navigation, the peaceful management of disputes. And the heart of these principles is a rules-based international order. A rules-based order cannot survive on declarations alone. It must be reinforced through cooperation, strengthened through collective action, and defended through sustained commitment. This is precisely the vision behind the free and open and rules-based Indo-Pacific. As we mark a decade, or nearly a decade, since the articulation of this concept, the challenge before us this morning is clear. How do we translate these principles into practical cooperation that safeguards peace, stability, and prosperity across our shared maritime domain? For the Philippines, partnerships and cooperations have become an essential pillar of this effort. This cooperation takes many forms: defense modernization, joint and combined exercises, capacity building initiatives, intelligence and information sharing, and enhanced operational coordination among maritime forces. In 2025 alone, the Philippines conducted 20 joint maritime activities with partners including Japan, the United States, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, France, and India. These activities send a strong message. The Philippines does not stand alone, and the defense of international law does not belong to one nation. The stability of our seas depends on the collective resolve of nations that believe in openness, transparency, and the peaceful resolution of disputes. Because the future of the Indo-Pacific will be shared not only by power, but by the principles we choose to defend and the partnerships we choose to build. Our institute firmly believes that the Philippines cannot and should not stand alone, nor should the international community work in silos. To promote free, open, and rules-based Indo-Pacific, cooperation must be collective, principled, and sustained, grounded in international law, reinforced by shared responsibility, and driven by the clear understanding that maritime security is indivisible. It is in the spirit that we gather today to exchange ideas, deepen cooperation, and identify concrete ways to safeguard the maritime domain for the benefit of all in the Indo-Pacific. Good morning, and thank you very much. I wish everyone a productive and meaningful discussion this morning and this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Professor Manhit, for that very inspiring message of cooperation. Here in the Strat base, we've always believed in a whole of society approach. That's why every time we hold conferences like this, we always make sure that we gather together representatives from the government, from the private sector, think tanks, and of course, members and representatives from the diplomatic community, like-minded partners and states. As Professor Manhit said, the Philippines should not stand alone, especially in addressing these risks and threats that we are facing today, and that if we really want to achieve a free and open Indo-Pacific, we really need to work together. And I'm sure that that is what we will be exploring together this afternoon. So without further ado, I am also pleased to introduce our next speaker who will deliver this forum's keynote message. So please give a warm round of applause to the Ambassador of Japan to the Philippines, His Excellency Endo Kazuya.
Secretary Eduardo Año, National Security Advisor, esteemed panelists and experts, distinguished guests, fellow colleagues from the diplomatic corps, ladies and gentlemen, magandang mga po sa inyong lahat. It is a great honor for me to speak here today. I extend my sincere appreciation to the Strat-Based Institute and the Japan Institute of International Affairs, JIIA, for convening this important symposium. I cannot thank Dindo enough for his team's continued cooperation. And I'm truly delighted to see some of my mentors and friends of JIIA, Japan's leading think tank, here in Manila. Of course, my deepest appreciation goes to Secretary Año for his esteemed engagement today. Today, we discuss safeguarding the maritime domain for a free and open Indo-Pacific, which is an extremely timely topic. The global situation surrounding maritime safety is too serious to start my talk with my poor joke. This week, we have heard news stories regarding the conduct of drone operations, oil price hikes caused by disruptions of transit in the strait. While they might not be the primary focus of this week's headlines, as mentioned, the tensions around the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea, remain very serious. Amid the time of rising tensions, it is imperative that we reaffirm the long-standing collective efforts that we cultivated to strengthen our collective grip on the maritime order through cooperation and respect for the rule of law. By bringing together leading experts from Japan, the Philippines, and the United States, India, I trust this conference provides a valuable platform to deepen discussions as to how we can address security challenges at sea, in the air, and within the economic sphere, guided by both our fundamental principles and deep-seated commitment to pragmatism. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the Free and Open Indo-Pacific, or FOIP, since its launch by late Prime Minister Abe Shinzo. Over the past decade, shifts in the balance of power, intensifying strategic competition, and the challenges posed by advanced technologies, including telecommunications, AI, critical minerals, have further underscored the importance of cooperation among like-minded partners. Looking back, it is heartening that many countries have adopted their own respective Indo-Pacific strategies. The term Indo-Pacific does not sound unfamiliar anymore. Furthermore, ASEAN's advocacy for the ASEAN outlook for Indo-Pacific demonstrates a high degree of synergy with Japan's own initiatives. Parallel to these efforts, significant progress has been made through multilateral frameworks such as US, Japan, Philippines, and US, Japan, Australia, India Quad. In her policy speech to the Japanese Diet last month, our Prime Minister Takaichi Sanae, noted the growing need for countries to strengthen their autonomy and resilience, and expressed her commitment to the evolution of the free and open Indo-Pacific initiatives to make the region even stronger and more prosperous. While the current environment remains undeniably complex, we should be confident in the substantive depth of our deliberations and the concrete measures we have implemented to navigate the evolving landscape. The question now arises, why must the free and open Indo-Pacific evolve at this juncture. It is simple, simply because the world has changed considerably. As the rules-based order faces serious challenges, we require a clear guiding perspective for our regional architecture. Since its inception, the concept of a free and open Indo-Pacific has evolved in a way that embraces a variety of perspectives and reflects the changing environments, all while maintaining its core foundational principles. Together, we work with willing partners to maintain and enhance regional connectivity and cultivate a region rooted in freedom and the rule of law. Safeguarding the region from force or coercion is essential to fostering a prosperous future. It is then a natural choice to upgrade and evolve our free and open Indo-Pacific vision. I believe that there are some elements that should be integrated in our deliberations. First, now more than ever, like-minded partners must work together to uphold and reinforce a free and open international order, an order that should benefit all countries, large and small alike, in the long run. As maritime democracies positioned along vital sea lanes, Japan and the Philippines are natural partners. Japan places the utmost value on its collaboration with the Philippines, a strategic partner that shares our vision for realizing a free and open Indo-Pacific. Our two countries are steadily and rapidly deepening security cooperation with the support and under the strong leadership of Secretary Anyo. Shortly after I started my service in the Philippines, we formally signed the Reciprocal Access Agreement, RAA, which was subsequently approved by the Philippine Senate and Japan's National Diet, respectively, and has since entered into force. Negotiations on the Acquisition and Cross-Servicing Agreement, ACSA, commenced last spring, and the agreement was officially signed during Foreign Minister Motegi's visit to Manila in January. The Philippines is also the main recipient and partner of our official security assistance, OSA. Last month, I had the honor of attending the handover ceremony of 5 coastal surveillance radar systems with Secretary of National Defense, Gilberto Teodoro. Together with the US, the Philippines, and other like-minded partners, Japan has been conducting numerous maritime cooperative activities, MCA, and the latest trilateral iteration took place in northern Luzon just last week. Trilateral cooperation among the Philippines, Japan, the US, and the quadrilateral cooperation among the Philippines, Japan, the US, Australia are both growing rapidly. We anticipate strengthened participation of the Japan Self-Defense Forces in the upcoming exercises held in the Philippines, particularly in the Balikatan. Second, enhancing economic resilience has become an increasingly critical priority. 10 years ago, the focus was more on enhancing the connectivity for regional development, but now enhancing resilience is also the mainstream issue in the Indo-Pacific region. Japan has been actively supporting the Philippines in strengthening its economic resilience, guided by the strong belief that a prosperous, resilient, and like-minded Philippines in our neighborhood is essential to Japan's own national interest. On top of the fact that Japan has been the Philippines' largest ODA donor for decades, and around 1,600 Japanese companies are operating in the Philippines today, we are proud to have supported the enhancement of the Philippine Coast Guard's vessels through our official development assistance. This includes the provision of its largest and most capable vessels, such as the BRP Teresa Magbanua and the BRP Melchora Aquino. They are defending the rule of law in the sea around the country, day by day. I'm pleased to share that this afternoon we will hold the handover ceremony of 13 generators for the Philippine Coast Guard. These units will provide stable power supply to PCG vessels while they are in port, ensuring the proper maintenance and management of onboard systems, which directly contributes to strengthening the Philippines' resilience. Enhancing supply chain resilience through diversification is also paramount. Therefore, it is indispensable to review supply chains and strengthen cooperation between like-minded countries to reduce excessive dependency on specific countries. For instance, Japanese and Philippine businesses have been working together to produce minerals, including nickel, to operate facilities utilizing LNG, liquidated natural gas, and to establish a liquidated petroleum gas terminal. To further strengthen the Philippines' economic resilience, Japan places great emphasis on connectivity. This focus lies at the heart of our broader efforts to consolidate a free and open Indo-Pacific. Enhanced connectivity also lays the foundation for the supply chain resilience. While we are in the final stages of formalizing our agreement with the Philippine government this month, I'm pleased to share that the third tranche of the Metro Manila subway project and the Central Mindanao High Standard Highway construction project are the next milestones down the road. Ensuring a healthy digital infrastructure is another area to enhance our economic resilience and connectivity. Japanese businesses are already making contributions for the development and maintenance of the undersea cable networks in the Philippines. The Japanese government has also been supporting the development of an open, interoperative, secure, reliable, and trusted ICT ecosystem, demonstrated by the provision of open radio access network laboratory equipment. Collaborations to enhance capacity against cyber attacks are also ongoing on multiple fronts. This year marks not only the 10th anniversary of Free and Open Indo-Pacific and the Arbitration Award, but also the 70th anniversary of the normalization of diplomatic relations between Japan and the Philippines. Over 7 decades, our partnership has grown into one founded on trust, shared values, and strategic cooperation. The Philippines ASEAN chairship would highlight ASEAN's central role in maintaining balance, stability, and inclusiveness across Indo-Pacific. Together, these milestones remind us that maritime security is not only about addressing present challenges, but also about honoring long-standing commitments and shaping a future anchored in law, cooperation, and shared responsibility. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of attending a commencement ceremony of a maritime academy established by NYK and TDG. Major Japanese shipping companies have established their respective maritime academies in the Philippines, as Filipino seafarers account for about 70% of the crew on Japanese-operated vessels. This simple fact clearly showcases that maritime safety is our shared agenda for Japan and the Philippines. New Filipino graduates filled with brightest hope for the future always remind me of the need for our collective efforts to realizing a free and open Indo-Pacific. As we look ahead, one thing is clear. Peace and stability cannot be taken for granted. It must be actively and collectively sustained. Japan will continue to work closely with the Philippines, ASEAN members, the US, and other like-minded partners to ensure that the Indo-Pacific remains free, open, and governed by international law. Once again, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to Stratbase and JIA. I trust that today's discussions will be both engaging and fruitful, and will give us opportunities to translate ideas into actions in the future. Mag-isa po tayo para sa malaya at maunlad na Indo-Pacific. Maraming salamat po. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Endo. Very important message. Definitely, peace and stability cannot be taken for granted, and that like-minded partners must work together. Once again, a round of applause, please, for Ambassador Endo Kazuya. All right. So this event actually is part of the official celebration of the 70th anniversary of the normalization of the diplomatic relations between the Philippines and Japan. And actually, we're going to have another conference towards the end of the month. I think that's going to be on March 24, another conference to discuss strategic or strengthening strategic ties between the Philippines and Japan. So we hope to see you all there again on March 24. So, but before we proceed to our next speaker, allow me to recognize some more important people who's with us today. We have with us a former Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, General Manny Bautista. Hi, sir. All right. Also with us today, former Supreme Court Associate Justice Antonio Carpio. Good morning, sir. And we also have with us today representatives from Spain, Malaysia, United Kingdom, European Union, France, Taiwan, and Vietnam. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. All right, so we just heard the Japanese perspective from Ambassador Endo. Now it's time for us to hear the Philippine perspective from our next keynote speaker. We are very privileged to have with us today the National Security Advisor and the Director General of the National Security Council. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Honorable Eduardo Año.
Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps, His Excellency Endo Kazuya, Ambassador of Japan, His Excellency Robert Ewing, Acting Ambassador of the United States, Her Excellency Ana Pernilia Perry, Ambassador of Sweden, Secretary Alfredo Pascual of the Philippine Council for Foreign Relations, Ambassador Takio Yamada, Executive Director, Japan Institute of International Affairs Center for Global Outreach, Professor Victor Andres Dindo Manhit, President, Stratbase Institute, former Associate Justice Antonio Carpio, Supreme Court of the Philippines, former Chief of Staff, AP, Manny Bautista, my mentor, DDG Nestor Jerico from NSC, ADG Cornelio Valencia from NSC, Rear Admiral, newly promoted Rear Admiral J. Tariela of the Philippine Coast Guard, Admiral Tomohisa Take, the retired 32nd Chief of Staff, Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force. Panelists and participants of the symposium, officials and representatives from the Philippine national government agencies present, friends and partners from the different diplomatic missions, friends from the private sector, academe, and media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, magandang umaga, ohayo gozaimasu. The Indo-Pacific stands at a strategic inflection point. 10 years after the articulation of the free and open Indo-Pacific, we face intensifying gray zone competition, growing maritime insecurity across regions, and mounting pressures on global supply chains. The maritime domain is no longer peripheral to global stability. It is indispensable to it. Over 60% of global trade moves through Indo-Pacific Sea lanes, while the vast majority of global digital traffic travels through submarine cables beneath these waters. Energy flows, food systems, logistic networks, and financial markets all depend on open and secure maritime routes. When maritime stability is disrupted, the consequences are systemic rather than regional. In addition, the Indo-Pacific is home to some of the world's most biodiverse ecosystems, yet illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing continues to threaten food security, livelihoods, and marine sustainability. Climate change further compounds these vulnerabilities through rising sea levels, warming waters, and coral degradation. For its part, the Philippines is deeply concerned about the escalating maritime challenges that threaten our sovereignty, security, and sustainable development in the West Philippine Sea. We continue to observe illegal, coercive, aggressive, and deceptive or gray zone tactics, including illegal presence, swarming operations, obstruction of lawful resupply missions, collisions and ramming, dangerous maneuvers at sea, water cannoning and laser pointing incidents, militarizations of artificial islands, deployment of maritime militias, resource interference, unilateral employment of domestic regulations over international waters, and other coercive activities designed to alter facts in the water while remaining below the threshold of armed conflict. As National Security Advisor and Chair of the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea, I witness daily how these challenges unfold in real time, affecting our Coast Guard and Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources personnel, our Navy, and our fisher folk deprived of livelihood who are operating within our exclusive economic zone. These issues are not abstract. They directly impact our fishermen, our environment, and our national resilience. These interconnected challenges demand collective and sustained actions. Let me offer several imperatives where we can encourage and foster greater alignment and cooperation in maritime governance. First, we must strengthen maritime domain awareness across the Indo-Pacific. Maritime domain awareness must move from aspiration to regional cooperation and integration. Interoperability of systems for shared situational awareness and real-time information exchange are no longer optional. They are indispensable for navigating the complexities of the modern maritime environment. Satellite monitoring, AI-enabled anomaly detection, and data fusion capabilities should be integrated into coherent frameworks that support timely decision-making and coordinated responses. Data fusion centers are crucial for coordinated action. Integrating sensor data, intelligence reports, and open source information for real-time situational awareness. We need to establish a common operating picture across the Indo-Pacific for a broader, more comprehensive, and more integrated maritime domain awareness and response. We must see the whole picture, not in pieces, not in parts, but as one coherent whole. For smaller maritime states, capacity building is essential. They need to leverage and partner with more advanced and like-minded countries in order to gain access to advanced surveillance technologies, sustained technical training, and interoperable systems, all of which are the imperatives to transform vulnerability into resilience, and resilience into credible deterrence. Without long-term investment in capacity and expertise, even the clearest legal rights become difficult to enforce on the ground. Second, partnerships remain indispensable in this effort. Through bilateral, multilateral, and minilateral engagements with the United States, Australia, Japan, India, and the European Union and other like-minded countries, the Philippines has enhanced operational capabilities, improved interoperability, and strengthened deterrence. Joint patrols, coordinated presence operations, and expanded defense cooperation have yielded tangible improvements in maritime awareness and readiness. Minilateral arrangements, in particular, provide agile and focused collaboration that builds trust while reinforcing long-term resilience against coercion. Towards this, bigger and more advanced nations must take the lead in bolstering our MDA, response capabilities, defense posture, and tools and assets to foster trust and efficiency, enabling us to project strength collectively while building long-term resilience against coercion. Third, we must fortify economic cooperation and economic resilience because they are pragmatic paths to a free and open Indo-Pacific. Maritime security undeniably extends beyond defense cooperation. It is inseparable from economic security. This is attainable if we deepen economic integration to strengthen our position in global supply chains and its influence in trade negotiations. Energy transit routes, semiconductor supply chains, port infrastructure, and undersea cables form part of a broader maritime ecosystem that underpins global prosperity. Disruptions at sea reverberate across economies, strengthening supply chain resilience, protecting critical undersea infrastructure, and investing in quality connectivity are therefore security imperatives. Fourth, sustainable cooperation must be built on pillars of transparency, equality of benefits, and unwavering respect for sovereign rights. Yes, we can promote peace and mutual gains without eroding legal impediments or entitlements. This could include transparent joint scientific research on marine biodiversity and climate impacts, coordinated efforts for resource conservation, like sustainable fisheries management and multilateral environmental protection initiatives under legal and inclusive frameworks that allow us to fully develop our blue economy. In the face of sustained aggressions and belligerent actions, Our response has been firm, measured, and anchored in law. One of the approaches we have adopted is what we describe as strategic transparency. And nations in the Indo-Pacific can draw important learnings from our experiences. By publicly documenting unsafe maritime conduct, releasing verified footage, and engaging international media and briefing partners and allies, we raise reputational cost and deny coercive actors the advantage of ambiguity. Transparency mobilizes collective supports for the rule-based order and ensured accountability. In the gray zone environment, where ambiguity is exploited, clarity and truth as vital instruments of deterrence. Along these efforts, there is a need to actively involve non-military actors, such as think tanks, academia, and civil society organizations. They play a vital role in fact-based transparency, countering disinformation, and building cross-border understanding. Public diplomacy and Track 1.5, Track 2, and other maritime dialogues should also be institutionalized. They are critical for maintaining communication channels and shared norms. Finally, all these efforts must remain firmly anchored in international law. The 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea remains the foundation of maritime order. The West Philippine Sea transcends bilateral concerns. It is a critical and decisive test for the international community's resolve to uphold the UNCLOS as the framework for resolving maritime disputes and to defend the binding force of the 2016 arbitral award in the face of coercive challenges. What hangs in the balance is nothing less than the credibility of the international rule-based order. The arbitral award is clear. It invalidated China's illegal 9 and now 10-line claim, or the expansive maritime claims unsupported by UNCLOS, affirming the Philippines' sovereign rights within its EEZ and clarifying the legal status of certain maritime features. More fundamentally, it reinforced the principle that disputes must be resolved through law rather than force. As such, any arrangement that implicitly legitimizes unlawful claims or rewards coercive behavior undermines regional stability and weakens the rule-based system. The Philippines will not support mechanisms that dilute sovereign rights affirmed by UNCLOS and the arbitral award. Effective dispute management must prioritize confidence-building measures that promote stability while preserving legal entitlements. As ASEAN chair, the Philippines will work to ensure that maritime security remains central to ASEAN centrality. We will explore mechanisms that enable a more coherent, coordinated, and integrated approach to maritime governance. We will advance practical cooperation in maritime domain awareness, strengthen maritime exercises, and reinforce principled language anchored in international law. ASEAN centrality must be principled and grounded in respect for sovereignty and the peaceful settlement of disputes. Developments beyond our region reinforce the urgency of safeguarding the maritime domain. Disruptions in key choke points elsewhere, militarization in contested waters, and heightened cross-strait sensitivities demonstrate that maritime instability anywhere has global implications. No region is insulated from these dynamics. The defense of the maritime domain is ultimately the defense of global stability. When the seas are secure, the rules that sustain peace and commerce remain strong. The experience in the West Philippine Sea reminds us that international law must be operational, not rhetorical. Maritime security is a collective good that no single state can safeguard alone. The Indo-Pacific will remain free and open only if it remains governed by law, sustained by cooperation, and protected through shared responsibility. Let us therefore move from one vision to implementation, from principles to operational cooperation, and from shared concerns to shared commitment. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay tayong lahat.
I asked the secretary to stay on stage for a quick photo opportunity. May we also invite the ambassador, Endo Kazuya, and Professor Manhit, please, for a quick photo opportunity. All right. And together with and okay. All right, once again, let's give another round of applause for Secretary Eduardo Año for that very comprehensive presentation. All right. Okay, so we now move on to the first panel of our forum, entitled Securing Maritime Security in the Indo-Pacific, Strengthening Cooperation Between Japan and Regional Partners. So this morning, we are bringing together distinguished experts to discuss how like-minded partners, as mentioned earlier by by the ambassador, by Secretary Año, and by Professor Manhit, how like-minded partners can deepen cooperation to strengthen maritime security in the Indo-Pacific, from enhanced joint maritime cooperative activities to strategic defense planning and capability alignment, to safeguard sea lanes, uphold freedom of navigation, and protect global trade amid actions that threaten maritime security in the region. So to kickstart today's discussion, it is a privilege to have with us today the 32nd Chief of Staff of the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause for Admiral Tomohisa Takei.
Good morning, everybody. I'm sorry I don't use any slide. Please look at me. So thank you for the kind introduction. I directly focus discussion on these issues on Japan and the Southeast Asia. The view I express today does not reflect those of the Japanese government. Due to the historical circumstances, Japan has refrained from committing politically to security issues in the Southeast Asia. For this reason, Japan has primarily engaged economically in this region and for a long time. Following its post-war recovery and period of rapid economic growth from mid-1950s and early 1970s, Japan cooperated with regional countries on economic development. First, the four Asia dragons, South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and Hong Kong, achieved rapid growth of the 1960s, Southeast Asia, including Philippines, as followed, and lastly, China's economic development began with its reform and opening up policy in 1980s. The economic development of rising countries naturally paved the way for heightened nationalism and strengthened military capabilities. In Southeast Asia, the South China Sea has become a stage where the coastal countries compete for national interest. One such issue is so-called the South China Sea dispute, which is fundamentally a territorial dispute over the maritime features scattered across one of the world's most strategically important waterways. This dispute is ongoing. In the 1990s, the scope of Japan's security policy expanded geographically to the Asia-Pacific region, beginning with 1996, Prime Minister Hashimoto and President Clinton summit meeting. Since then, Japan's security policy has become closely linked with Southeast Asia's securities. By adding the military dimension, Prime Minister Abe's Free and Open Indo-Pacific (FOIP) has dramatically advanced Japan's security ties with Southeast Asia. The vision primarily focused on promoting the rule of law, freedom of navigation, free trade, pursuing economic prosperity, and committing to peace and stability. For example, since 2017, Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force has conducted long-term cruise training in the Indo-Pacific region. Primarily in the South China Sea, a protocol and exercise with regional navies are selected based on diplomatic necessities. As well as ground and air self-defense force actively strengthen defense cooperation and defense exchange with regional counterparts based on the FOIP in the area of the key trade route in the Indo-Pacific Oceans. Additionally, Japan Coast Guard is proactively contributing to enhancing law enforcement capabilities of Southeast Asian countries. Over the past decades, China's remarkable development of maritime law enforcement and military capability has structurally transformed security environment in East Asia. Specifically, the focus of regional security cooperation has shifted from transnational threats such as religious extremism, piracy, and terror to China's coercive gray zone operation in the South China Sea. Gray zone operation inherently carry the potential for the escalation to use of force. For example, the collision between Chinese Coast Guard and Chinese naval vessels in August last year appears the Chinese Navy has begun actively engaging in the Scarborough Shoal. Until then, the Chinese naval vessels had only observed from distance, but this time they were directly involved. The war in Ukraine, now entered the 5th year, has exposed the United Nations Security Council's inability to prevent war. Moreover, the war has exposed, firstly, no one can deter a military invasion carried out with conviction and within a limited geographical space by the nuclear superpowers and permanent United Nations Security Council members. Secondly, it also indicates when nuclear superpowers become involved as advisory or allies, both sides prioritize avoiding escalation to nuclear weapons, making prolonged conventional warfare will likely occur. Applying this lesson to Southeast Asia and East Asia, the following can be said. In the future, if China attempts to alter the status quo in the region with conviction, the United States would not be able to deter it. If the situation escalates to U.S. military intervention, both the U.S. and China would likely avoid nuclear war. This would change the war to protracted war of attrition. New challenges for maritime security are also emerging at sea, such as cyber attacks against critical maritime infrastructure and sabotage of submarine cable, and so on. For small and medium-sized countries like Japan and the Philippines, if they want to enjoy continued peace and prosperity while maintaining their sovereignty and territorial integrity, it is paramount that they strengthen deterrence and diversify their security partnerships. The first step of this diversification would be to reinforce the ASEAN through multiple unilateral frameworks such as Philippine, United States, Japan, and Australia security partnership called the Squad. Second, they should promote the participation of non-regional countries in regional security to heighten international awareness. And third, to strengthen practical capacity building support by enhancing equipment transfer and strengthen joint military exercise based on realistic scenarios. Japan can actively participate in all three areas and is already doing so. Let me show you one of the programs. In recent years, Japan's foreign policy has emphasized deterring unilateral change of status quo by force to ensure peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region and create favorable security environment. The Official Security Assistance Program, OSA, established in April 2023, aims to enhance the deterrence capability of like-minded countries at no cost. It will take time, but stronger regional countries may be able to counterbalance China's coercive activities. While the current OSA involves the transfer of finished equipment to the regional counterpart, I believe it should expand in the future to include transfer of production bases, thereby enhancing partners' countries' manufacturing capabilities and jointly strengthen the supply chain of defense equipment. Although Japan's direct involvement is limited, it can collaborate with like-minded countries to uphold the rule-based order. This includes urging China to exercise restraint in various ways. I stop here. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Admiral Takei. Up next to share his insights is Captain Sarabjit Parmar, Distinguished Fellow at the Council for Strategic and Defense Research. Let's give him a round of applause, please.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to the organizers for this invite. I forego the Raisina Dialogue to be here, my first visit here, and it's a pleasure. I've been given 10 minutes to cover India's contribution to maritime security in the Indo-Pacific. It's an impossible task, so I'm just going to flag a few issues which I think from which we can get convergences out of. So let me position India in the geography. We are stuck between two hotspots, the Persian Gulf and the South China Sea, which leaves the Indian Ocean region virtually more peaceful and more stable, but not as stable as we think. So let me give you certain examples. North Arabian Sea. We got the Red Sea issue, which has been ongoing for some time. The Persian Gulf, which has been simmering for many decades, but is presently on fire, especially the West Asia side, and then, of course, the South China Sea. And we have issues in our neighborhood, which is impacting maritime security in the Bay of Bengal. Let me position that very clearly. And so, therefore, what are the maritime threats, risks, and opportunities that arise from this? So let me take a look at traditional and hybrid threats. Houthis is one example, the Red Sea, and it's a known fact that instability on land will impact the stability in the maritime domain. But the Gaza situation, for the first time, projected instability in an area far away from the center of gravity. The Red Sea is a perfect example, and what we see happening in West Asia has a cascading effect not only in the Persian Gulf, the North Arabian Sea, but the last 48 hours of the incident of the sinking of the Iranian ship south of Sri Lanka clearly indicates that in a conflict in the maritime domain, you will find conflicts or incidences like this everywhere, and this is something we have to think about. And I dare say this recent incident has got a lot of people running to look at the efficacy of the laws of armed conflict and the implications and the applications, and perhaps it is going to test the resilience of US strategic partnerships with a few nations around the world. But let's see how that pans out. Among the other issues are non-traditional threats that's on the seas and emanating from the land, and that results in maritime terrorism and crimes, which is rife the world over, both South China Sea and the archipelago areas, and of course the Indian Ocean region. Then we have piracy, whether you call it piracy 1.0 due to Somalia, and the recent piracy 2.0, as I call it, due to the actions of the Houthis in the Red Sea, which has allowed piracy to open the doors again. And if we go back to what happened during Piracy 1.0, I don't think it's something we would like to let it repeat. Disasters and pandemics is another example, and one more point is non-combatant evacuation operations. Instability in the region, nations have a right to get their citizens out. We need to look at this a little bit more closely. So what's happening? In the IOR, especially North Arabian Sea, we have the presence of over 40 navies, anti-piracy patrols, CTFs, multi and bilateral exercises, and of course now the ongoing conflict which is there. Not a happy place to be, and the margin for error is drastically reducing. That's one. Then of course we have the issues of bases and places, and I'm talking especially about China. China's engagements in the IOR are well known. Their presence is increasing. And since we are looking at the aggressiveness of China in the South China Sea, it's only a matter of time before China exports those aggressive actions to the IOR and beyond the first and the second island chain. And that is going to happen when China is able to project maritime power to influence events credibly in the areas beyond the South China Sea and the East China Sea. It's only a matter of time. And the day the carrier battle group sails out with its full complement of aircraft and, of course, the support ships, I think we're going to look at a different situation in the Indo-Pacific, whether it's in the Pacific Island areas or right up to the eastern coast of Africa. It's only a matter of time, and I think that's what we need to look at. There is an alphabet soup of organizations. What is the effectiveness? I leave that question in the open air for you to think about it. So are many laterals a way forward? And that's something I think we would need to ponder about, but I will cover it. HADR is increasing. I think this is the lowest hanging fruit, and there's a lot of work being done between the nations. You have the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium working groups, the standard operating procedures which have been accepted by IORA. You have the Quad guidelines on this. So this is an effective way to work together. And I think the best example is the COVID-19 situation, where nations work together, especially the Quad nations work together. And I do know that the chiefs of the navies and the Indo-PACOM were on the buzzer every day to saying, how do we work together? How do we simplify? Give you one good example, which I was told, is the airlift of Indian vaccines into Fiji by a US aircraft. I don't think you can get it better than that. That's an example I'd like to give here. A word on non-combatant evacuation operations. We have been lucky that so far we've had stable governments who could provide a window of opportunity, especially for India and its Navy, to go in and get its people out. Along with that, we also evacuated citizens of many other countries, and give you the example of Yemen in 2015, where we took out 1,291 foreign nationals from 35 nations based on the request of those nations. Let me muddy the picture here or give you a horror story. What about NEO during a pandemic, or NEO during a disaster, or an NEO where the government in power is unable to provide you that sense of security you can get your people out? Are we willing to work together to put boots on ground to get them out? So having said that, just take a word on submarine cables, or if you'd like to call them seabed lines of communication. Rupturing of these cables, I don't think there's a possibility of being intentional, but do remember, all entities, whether they are nations, governments, organizations, or even non-state actors, they all thrive on the information that comes through submarine cables. Let me add the China angle. We are seeing China laying its own cables in the Indian Ocean region connecting up to the eastern coast of Africa. And then, of course, there is the buzz about these submarine cables being used as passive array sonars. And it's difficult technology, but I think that's an area in which nations like-minded can work together. Having said that, let me get back to the main point of what is India's approach to maritime security in the Indo-Pacific. Free, open, and an inclusive Indo-Pacific. And I think the word inclusiveness is slowly entering the lexicon of many nations of the Indo-Pacific. We look at through a point of holistic maritime security. We look at threats, challenges, risks, and the opportunities that arise for nations to work together. And we'd like to step away from the moniker of net security provider. It's a very difficult term to define. So we'd like to go by the terms of preferred security partner and first responder. And that is the way in which we are looking at engaging nations. So if I give you the overall umbrella of SAGAR, or security and growth for all in the region. And now the new term which has come out, which is Mahasagar, or mutually and holistically assured security and growth for in the region. If that's the umbrella under which we operate, then we look at neighborhood first policy. Bit of a stress right now. There's a strain on that issue. We look at Look West, whether it's West Asia or the eastern coast of Africa, ASEAN centrality, the central pivot point of the Indo-Pacific, our Act East policy. We look at Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. We look at the Quad, and of course, as I mentioned, minilateralism. A word on the Quad. There's a cloud as to which direction is the Quad heading. So if there is an issue of the Leaders Summit not having taken place and Quad being a leaders-driven summit, then I think it's time that we have the Leaders Summit as soon as we can, despite the differences India and the US has. It will lend certain credibility, and MDA was mentioned, so therefore where are we going with the Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness Vision or project out there? Let me give a small word on India-US relations. There have been differences over the period of time for the last 2-3 years on tariffs and many other issues, but I think the security angle is very clear. So in the last 18 months or so, we have done 4 major exercises with the US. The Army is exercising in Alaska, we've had Malabar, we've had the special forces of both the air forces operating together, and we've also had Tiger Triumph, the exercise on the eastern coast of India, which is an amphibious come HADR exercise. So there is clarity on, I think, where the way US and India look at maritime security and security in the region, which is there. And let me put in a statement here. It can be argued that all the engagements that happen in the Indo-Pacific are provided by the security blanket based upon US alliances and strategic partnerships between nations the world over. So the question comes in is that do middle powers need to step up? And I think that's something that Japan, Philippines, India, Australia, and other middle powers can actually work together at the minilateral level and look ahead. We would like to look at the Indo-Pacific as shaping a favorable and positive maritime environment, and therefore we have certain engagements. Even as we speak today, the Indian Navy engages in over 24 bilateral institutional exercises. The one was mentioned with Philippines, and an equal number of multilateral exercises, the bedrock being interoperability. And I think that needs to be stressed upon and continued. Under the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative that was spoken in the East Asia Summit in 2019, we have 7 pillars. Maritime security is one of them, but it crosses the full menu of anything that comes under the maritime domain. There is a need for more Indo-Pacific nations to come on board. We have more extra-regional powers working on the IPOI, but we need more Indo-Pacific nations to come in, and I think more ASEAN nations to step in for that account. I've already mentioned the exercises. Then, of course, minilateral brew phase. We have the India, France, Australia. We have India, France, UAE, India, Japan, Australia, India, Japan, USA, India, Indonesia, Australia, the whole line of them. I like minilaterals. You take up a specific thing, you address the problem, you come out with a solution, you go on to the next one. It bypasses the complexity of working in a multinational organization. I think minilaterals is a way forward. We need to look at that. My last few points. Maritime governance was mentioned. The question is, what about enforcement of maritime governance? Do we have a convergence on it? There are different interpretations insofar as many international laws and conventions goes. The best example I can give you is UNCLOS. But yet, we have put differences aside and we have decided to work together. But do we need to look at an enforcement policy for maritime governance in the Indo-Pacific? That's perhaps something we can discuss. There is a need to build capacities and capabilities, enhance interoperability. Assets and numbers would be an issue, but I don't think that's a major issue which it can be overcome. Power dynamics, the solution always lies on land. Whether you need to address piracy in Somalia or the Houthis in Yemen. And then, of course, the cost dynamics will increase with instability increasing. The rerouting of SLOC south of the Cape is an indication of the future to come. So therefore, in the Indo-Pacific, that patch of water that connects Lombok, Sunda, Malacca, down the southern Indian Ocean region to the Cape has been a highly unmonitored area as of now. I think we need to concentrate on that together as an entity. And then, of course, I've already mentioned the China angle. We need to look at it more carefully. The national security strategy of the US is very clear that it will address the China situation. It will prevent power dynamics. It will prevent China from coming into a position of power. And I think we need to work to that together. And I will leave you with this statement by President Eisenhower, and I love this. History does not long entrust the care of the freedom or freedom to the weak or the timid. I think we all need to step up as middle powers and work together for a comprehensive maritime security in the Indo-Pacific. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, Captain Parmar. Very interesting speeches so far from Admiral Takei and Captain Parmar. I'm already looking forward to our panel discussion later. I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting exchange later on. So from our foreign experts, we now go to the Filipino experts that we have with us this morning. Our next speaker for this panel is the Deputy Chief of Staff for Plans, or J5, of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Major General Romel Cordova.
Excellencies, esteemed panelists, speakers, and distinguished guests, good morning. Thank you to Stratbase and Professor Dindo Manit for having me. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be invited in this symposium as we celebrate 70 years of the normalization of the Philippine-Japan diplomatic relations. The theme of this forum, as well as the topic of this panel, are very relevant as we continue to assess the impact of the current conflict, not only in Europe, but also in the Middle East. This morning, I'm tasked to provide my insights on the significance of strengthening defense and military cooperation between the Philippines and its regional partners, particularly Japan and like-minded countries. In my case, this is quite timely. The symposium is quite timely because I just came in the last few weeks. I just came from a series of bilateral and multilateral engagement and discussions. And just a few days ago, we just concluded a multilateral engagement with our counterparts from Australia, Japan, the US. In the next few minutes, I will argue that given the challenging and dynamic global and regional security environment, strengthening our Philippine defense and military cooperation between and among our ally, strategic partners, and like-minded countries in the region is a key element of our strategy. In particular, the Comprehensive Archipelagic Defense Concept, or CADC. In this slide, I will provide a very quick summary of the current and emerging security threats and challenges that we continue to face, as this was clearly or extensively discussed by our keynote speakers as well as previous speakers. Then I will outline the recent responses, efforts and initiatives being implemented not only by the Philippines, but also by other countries concerned of the stability of the Indo-Pacific region. Finally, I will briefly describe the future actions or our ways ahead. In the end, my talk will conclude with a call to action by our Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, General Romeo S. Browner, Jr. Now, the Philippines and the entire Indo-Pacific is facing a myriad of security challenges. In our case, the PRC's expansionist intent persists as it continues to assert its illegal claim of the entire South China Sea or West Philippine Sea. These coercive actions heighten regional tensions in a number of potential plus points, which may lead to armed confrontations threatening regional security and stability. Consequently, emerging middle powers in the region are taking strategic actions that are or may polarize the international system. It is also important to highlight that PRC's ICAD, or continuous illegal, coercive, aggressive, and deceptive actions, persist within Philippine territory and our maritime jurisdiction that seriously threaten our sovereignty and the exercise of our sovereign rights. Such tactics is perceived by us as a creeping invasion not only of our maritime domain, but also in the other domains like cyber, electromagnetic spectrum, and even in the cognitive domain. To address and manage these security challenges, concerned and affected countries in the region have pursued different strategic responses. First, a number of states in the Indo-Pacific region, especially those in the ASEAN region, have significantly increased their defense spending to be better prepared for any contingency or crisis. On a bilateral or multilateral basis, more countries are seeking to improve or enhance diplomatic, defense, and military cooperation at the policy, strategic, or operational levels. In fact, last December, our Chief of Defense, General Bronner, just signed the Australian, Japan, Philippine, US, Indo-PACOM framework of the Chief of Defense Council. This is a framework that would operationalize or institutionalize the agreement by the 4 defense ministers. So, and in relation to that, a few days ago, as I've said, we conducted a quadrilateral forum between my counterparts at the US Indo-PACOM, the Japan Self-Defense Force, and the Australian Defense Force to discuss how we operationalize this framework signed by our Chief of Defense. Third, on various formal or informal engagements, more countries in the region highlight the importance of adhering to rules-based international order to maintain peace, stability, and prosperity in the region. In this light, the Philippines is very active in advancing the legitimacy of UNCLOS and the 2016 arbitral ruling as it asserts its rights as a sovereign nation. In every opportunity, our President, our Secretary of National Defense, and our Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines continuously manifest our claim and our rights over the West Philippine Sea and our firm resistance to acquiescence to foreign occupation and control. Finally, like-minded countries in the region have been maintaining their active presence, showcasing multilateral cooperation and collective deterrence through the conduct of bilateral and multilateral joint sails or joint patrols, or what we call as maritime cooperative activities. For example, since we started the MCAs in the last quarter of 2023, we have now conducted a total of 35 bilateral and multilateral MCAs with various partner countries. And this is going to, as we are seeing, this is going to increase in the near future. In fact, we will be having one of our largest Balikatan exercises next month in April. And a number of countries, Japan, for example, is going to send more than 1,000 troops in the exercise with Australia, I think Canada, New Zealand, and I think France. And another 18 countries are going to participate in our Balikatan International Observers Program. As I mentioned earlier, security and defense cooperation between and among our allies, strategic partners, and friends is a key pillar in our defense and military strategy, in particular the CADC, as we seek to continue to develop our internal capability to protect and defend our territory, as well as secure the vast maritime domain under our jurisdiction. We will continue to foster and deepen bilateral, minilateral, and multilateral relationships to uphold the rules-based international order and make sure that the Indo-Pacific region remains free and open to peace-loving nations. Moreover, we shall continue to pursue confidence-building initiatives through military-to-military cooperation dialogues, and forums, and implementation of transparency measures that are intended to build a strong relationship founded on trust and confidence. At the operational level, we will endeavor to develop interoperability among our military counterparts by increasing the frequency, the size, the scope, and the complexity of our military exercises and other activities, as well as pursue initiatives involving information sharing and the transfer of technology and expertise. In the end, the principal goal of our deepened and intensified cooperation between and among our allies, partners, and friends is to build, develop, and enhance our collective deterrence and collective defense capability to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific. In closing, allow me to reiterate the marching order of the Chief of Staff, General Romeo S. Bronner, in relation to international engagement and his request to our partners, specifically in the region, and I quote, "The Philippines continues to encourage our allies for a continued partnership for both the academic and policy community to sustain the institutions and ideas in pursuit of a free, open, and prosperous Indo-Pacific." Thank you for listening. I look forward to an engaging discussion later. Maraming salamat po.
All right, thank you very much, General Cordova. And our final speaker for this panel is giving us another Filipino perspective. We have Major General Restituto Padilla Jr., former spokesperson and Deputy Chief of Staff for J5 of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Major General Padilla is also the Executive Director for Corporate Public Policy, Risk Management, and Sustainability of the PTC Group. Let's give him a round of applause, please.
Thank you very much, Dana, for the kind introduction. At the outset, allow me to express my appreciation to the Strat-based ADRI group for the invitation and the opportunity to speak. So, Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Professor Dindo, fellow panel members who spoke before me, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I was very happy to hear that the current J5 is now moving on a plane of momentum that we have created before. Before he sat into the position, and I was a former J5, the challenges of establishing that momentum for cooperation among the nations here in the Indo-Pacific was a challenge, and I will discuss that in a bit. But this morning, I shall offer my perspective as a former member of the Armed Forces and my learnings from the private sector going forward with practical recommendations. So, next slide, please. So, the Indo-Pacific is today the center of global economic gravity, and its maritime domain serves as the lifeline of international trade, and we all know that. More than 80% of global commerce moves by the sea, and a large portion of that passes through Indo-Pacific waters, from the Malacca Strait to the South China Sea and onward to the Northeast Asia area. These sea lanes are not merely shipping routes. They are the vital arteries of the global economy and the foundation of regional prosperity. So roughly 1/3 of global maritime trade, valued at more than 3 to 5 trillion annually, passes through the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea area. So needless to say, several times the value of the value of trade that goes through here is more than the Suez Canal, which is not even 1 trillion, and that of the which is about more than $1 trillion, and that of the Panama Canal, which is about 300 billion, making it one of the most strategically important maritime corridors in the world. Yet, the domain of the Indo-Pacific is becoming increasingly contested. Next slide, please. In recent years, we have seen intensifying geopolitical competition, maritime disputes, and militarization of key waterways, particularly in the South China Sea. At the same time, new developments, including expanding naval capabilities and undersea warfare platforms in the region, are starting to reshape the strategic balance and raising the stakes for maritime security. Alongside these traditional security concerns are non-traditional threats such as illegal fishing, piracy, maritime trafficking, cyber vulnerabilities affecting the maritime infrastructure. In this context, strengthening cooperation between Japan and its regional partners is no longer optional. It is imperative. We can no longer rely on the traditional alliances of the future, which are now being tested. First, next slide. Japan is a maritime nation whose economic survival depends on a secure sea line of communication. And needless to say, so is the Korean Peninsula or South Korea. Nearly all of Japan's energy imports and a majority of its trade passes through Indo-Pacific waters, and the stability of these routes is therefore a matter of strategic necessity not only for Japan, but for the entire region. Second, cooperation helps protect and reinforce the rules-based maritime order anchored in international law, particularly the UNCLOS. When countries act together to uphold these rules, the maritime commons remains open and predictable. When cooperation weakens, unilateral actions can erode the legal norms that have preserved maritime stability for decades, and that is what we are seeing with the unilateral actions of China. Next slide. Third, maritime security today requires network capacity because no single state possesses the resources to monitor and secure such vast oceans alone. Japan's advanced maritime capabilities, ranging from Coast Guard operations and maritime domain awareness technologies, to capacity building programs, can significantly strengthen regional resilience when shared with partners. And we have seen in the remarks earlier by the Japanese ambassador and even by the Secretary Anyo that many of these are already ongoing and hopefully will become strengthened further. We are already seeing encouraging examples of the cooperation because Japan has expanded maritime security assistance to Southeast Asian partners, including patrol vessels provision, training programs, and joint maritime exercises designed to enhance maritime law enforcement and situational awareness. Recent defense agreements and security cooperation between Japan and regional states, particularly the Philippines, also reflect a growing recognition that collective maritime security is essential to regional stability. Next slide. However, the consequences of failing to strengthen this cooperation could be severe. Without stronger coordination, maritime disputes may escalate, gray zone activities may proliferate, and criminal networks may exploit gaps in maritime governance. Even disruptions to key sea lanes could affect global supply chains and energy flows, as we are seeing right now in the Persian Gulf, with consequences that extend far beyond the Indo-Pacific. So what is the practical way forward? Next slide. First, we must enhance maritime domain awareness through shared information networks that allow partners to monitor maritime activity across the region in near real time. I'm not sure if this architecture is already up and about, and based on the discussions of the current AFPJ5, I hope discussions can lead to this. Second, we should expand joint maritime patrols, exercises, and operational coordination among navies and coast guards to improve interoperability and crisis response. Third, Japan and its partners should continue to invest in capacity building for regional maritime agencies. especially Coast Guards and law enforcement institutions. So the Philippines has been recipient of a lot of the assistance, but further to this, because of the growing and increasing tensions, we may need to reconsider more of it. Fourth, we should strengthen multilateral maritime cooperation platforms involving governments, industry, and academia, because maritime security today also involves cyber systems, undersea cables, ports, and maritime supply chains. And may I emphasize, undersea cables are fully threatened because of the events that transpired in the Nordic areas, as well as what we are seeing now with the increasing, quote-unquote, scientific and marine science research voyages of Chinese ships. Next slide. Finally, maritime security must remain anchored in shared principles, openness, respect for international law, and peaceful cooperation. If we succeed in building a stronger network of maritime partnerships, one that includes Japan and all its regional partners, we can ensure that the Indo-Pacific remains free, open, stable, and prosperous for generations to come. And may I just add that having heard the former J5 and all these undertakings that are currently ongoing for the increasing maritime cooperation activities, we hope that we can get the ASEAN navies too into the loop. We are doing trilaterals, quadrilaterals, and multilaterals, but the ASEAN as a whole continues to be a challenge, and I hope we can focus on that within ourselves in ASEAN, particularly this year when the Philippines is the ASEAN host. So thank you very much. I look forward to the discussion during the open forum. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, General Padilla. Very insightful speech that we have there. I'm sure that many of you or some of you have questions that you wish to ask our speakers. So we will now proceed to our panel discussion. So I would like to invite back on stage, please, to join us, Admiral Takei, Captain Parmar, General Cordova, and General Padilla. And to moderate the discussion, may we call on Dr. Charmaine Willoughby, non-resident fellow of the Strat-Based Institute and chair of the Department of International Studies at the De La Salle University in Manila. Let's all give them a round of applause, please.
Good morning to everyone. It's such an honor and a privilege to sit here amongst these very esteemed gentlemen and to raise some very important questions that have come up from their insights, from their presentations. One commonality that I found and learned from your interventions today is that all of us here, whether we're the Philippines, Japan, the United States, any other country that's represented in this room today, we all face different kinds of security challenges. We all understand that we are confronting not just traditional security challenges, but also non-traditional security challenges. Another theme that has emerged from the presentations from this panel is that there are inextricable linkages amongst the many actions and activities that we find ourselves today. So for instance, for Admiral Takay, you mentioned the inextricable linkage between Japan and Southeast Asia. For Captain Parmar, you mentioned the connection between the land and the sea, and one cannot really be separated from each other. General Cordova mentioned the importance of not just focusing on capacity building, but also the emphasis on confidence building. And the two actually must go together. And for General Padilla, you mentioned the importance of cooperation, obviously, but we also must support that with stability as we move towards prosperity. A third theme that has emerged from your interventions is the importance of minilateralism. And it is in this area of minilateralism that I'd like to raise the first question, because clearly Japan, Indonesia, and the Philippines must work together to create this networked maritime security framework. But where do you think are the biggest gaps today? Is it in capability, in coordination, or perhaps in political alignment? I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Perhaps we can start with Admiral Takay.
Yes, it is always, thank you very much. It is always challenging for us how to coordinate not only the allied country, but also the non-allied country in the specific issues in this region. I think, as I mentioned in my presentation, Japan and the Philippines and the other countries agreed that the RAA, the AXA, or the Japan's OSA, that is, I think that is the measures to connect each country's concern to the one, focusing in the one place. And the RAA and AXA is operational purpose arrangement. And the OSA, Japan's OSA, is a capacity building purpose. Yeah, to build the capability of regional countries. So the RAA and the AXA aim to facilitate the collective military response to Chinese hegemonic actions. They provide institutional frameworks that enable multi-layered cooperation among non-allied countries. I think that Japan should take leading role to expand these unilateral frameworks backed up with some AXA or the RAA. And for the OSA is a framework under which Japan provides grant some partner country endorsement and military capabilities if represent Japan's tangible contribution to this region. We should consider what is biggest challenges in the now we are facing is the United States wavering commitment to this region. How to cope with these issues? As one of the U.S. close allies and some important partners of the United States, Japan should take some visible and tangible action to enhance the relationship in the regions, to enhance the bilateral framework or some development or to widen the range of cooperation to meet the challenges.
Thank you for highlighting that Japan in this context may need to step up. General Padilla?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Charmaine. We are in a very rare and good setting right now because previously Japan faced some legal issues about increasing its activities abroad in terms of military assistance and the like. But now we have a government that has resolved its legal issues regarding that interpretation. And this opportunity presents for us in the region the opportunity to widen up the scale of this cooperation, and we're seeing it already. And in the case of the Philippines, I'm happy that the government has pushed forward with the RCA last 2024, And recently, with the signing of the reciprocal provision and supply services into this year, which are all enablers for increasing the field of cooperation among our two nations. What I want to see is the participation of other countries in the region, particularly, say, South Korea, and the other ASEAN countries. If they do come into the sphere of cooperation, we can expect an increase and widened level of cooperation that will impact better on securing this part of the Indo-Pacific. Because after all, what we are focusing on is our part of the Indo-Pacific, particularly where a lot of aggression and illegal activities by a unilateral player is being played out. So I need not add India, Australia, and the like, because we're seeing all of this increasingly as well.
Thank you, General Padilla. General Cordova, maybe some insights on some gaps that you see.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I limit my answer to identifying operational gaps. Based on our recent discussion with my counterparts, we highlight the importance of information sharing and interoperability. Now, the gap in information sharing is based on the fact that we are going to share not unclassified information, but classified information. And there are certain restrictions for each country on how to handle classified information. Now, we have an information sharing agreement with the United States, so we can share classified information with the United States. We are now, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Ambassador, but we are currently now undertaking or negotiating an information sharing arrangement with Japan and I think with Australia as well. So once we conclude that, these are policy issues that will address operational gap. There are still technical issues, but that's one of the things that we need to work on. So interoperability can only be achieved if we are able to communicate to our counterparts, as well as we can share information that will be useful at the operational level. Now, with respect to interoperability, that's certainly a continuing gap as well. But aside from policy gap like sharing information, there are also some technical issues that we need to address on. We are very thankful to Japan for the OSA grant on coastal radar systems, because that's part of addressing our operational gaps in terms of maritime domain awareness. We are pursuing initiatives to develop our capability in maritime domain awareness in order, again, to address interoperability issues. Now, exercises is a solution to interoperability issues, but again, the problem, it's not a problem, but it's a challenge, but it's a good one, is that as the operators or the operational commands go into the detail on how to address certain contingencies, we are now looking at actually very minor issues already, but it's minor, but it will have a great impact on how we operate together as a combined force or a joint force. So, yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Major General Cordova. Captain Parmar, from your perspective from India.
Thank you, but let me get back to the 4 areas you mentioned. So there will definitely always be differences. I think the main aim in a multilateral is to identify what is it that you want to achieve. What's your aim and objective? What are your convergences? And if your convergences outnumber your divergences, then of course you have an easy path. Where you have an equal balance or the divergences are a little more, but you agree upon working towards an aim and objective, then either you put the divergences aside so that they don't impact the working together, and you focus on the convergences. One of the biggest factors is that each nation will have a certain capacity and capability to address that situation. So therefore there will always be one nation who will take the lead, given its advantages on capacity and capability, and that needs to be respected. And At this point, let me give you two examples. So when the India-Australia-France trilateral started, and I was party to it from day one, I mean, we did a lot of groundwork. We looked at a lot of convergence points. But then, as luck would have it, there are a lot of hiccups that come along the way, and AUKUS jumped into the fray. So everything was put on hold. But I think we're trying to resurrect this trilateral, and I think work will progress. And therefore, you need to accept certain things, give it some time to put it aside, and then rework it. Another example I'll give you is I to U2. India, Israel, USA, UAE. Now, these four nations, and I'm looking specifically at UNCLOS. Out of all these four nations, India is the only nation who's ratified UNCLOS. US, Israel have neither signed nor ratified the main agreement. UAE has signed but not ratified. So any discussion among this trilateral on UNCLOS would obviously be sort of a non-starter. You'll have more divergences. So you need to identify which are the areas you can focus upon, capacities, capabilities, and more importantly, what is the strategic vision of that particular nation when you look at certain aims and objectives. I think if we can put that groundwork correctly, the trilateral or the or the minilateral will actually have a bigger chance of success.
Thank you. Now I have a specific question for Admiral Takai. You mentioned in your earlier answer that Japan needs to play a more active role. Do you think in the next perhaps 5 to 10 years, what role do you see Japan playing in strengthening deterrence and resilience while at the same time upholding the rules-based order?
In the recent years, the coming 2 or 3 years, Japan should cooperate with this country as one of the important allies of the United States. Either how to make the credibility of the United States commitment high through the emphasized host nation support in Japan for the U.S. deployed forces, and secondly, proactively participate in the revitalized U.S. industrial base in the homeland United States. And the coming years, it goes without saying that which area determined by the Maritime Cooperation, determined by the objective of Maritime Cooperation, and what threat we should cope with. And I believe we should prioritize countering the hybrid maritime threat posed by China in this region. The hybrid maritime threat, the Southeast Asia, there are 3 types of maritime threat. First one is China's graze operation in the South China Sea. Second is the cyber attacks on critical maritime infrastructure. Third one is, as I mentioned, sabotage of submarine cables. Among 3, the first one, how to cope with Chinese graze on operation, could be the urgent issue, and could be the sphere that Japan and the regional country should cope with. Prioritize this area for coming 5 or 10 years. So next question coming from this question is how to balance between the deterrence and the resiliency, and to balance this matter is coming the question for us. I think regarding maritime cooperation, Japanese government is implementing measures to strengthen military presence in this region, as well as expanding capacity building support for regional countries in coming 5 or 10 years. And these efforts aim to maintain rule-based maritime order and strengthen the capability of friendly nations. Through this effort, Japan and the Philippines should entangle the United States in regional security for coming 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years.
Thank you, Admiral. I have another question. So I'd like to go back to Captain Parmar. In your presentation, you mentioned that sure we have maritime governance and we've focused a lot on maritime governance, but what about enforcement? So in terms of this broad question, I'd like to know what your thoughts are maybe on how India sees its role evolve as as perhaps a key maritime security provider for the Indo-Pacific.
And actually, I would like to disagree with the maritime security provider. It's a term that it's difficult to define, as I mentioned. And when we were revising the 2015 Maritime Strategy document of the Navy, and I was party to it, we tried to look at the aspect of how would you define maritime security provider. And we realized that we were tying ourselves up in knots. So we went the very simple way. We didn't define it, we treated it as a concept. So we looked at 3 pillars: stability, security, and peace. So now that we are looking at India as a preferred security partner and first responder, I think the 3 pillars of stability, security, and peace, enhancing stability, ensuring security, and preserving peace, are 3 pillars that will work insofar as a free and an open Indo-Pacific approach is concerned. But the bedrock is, if it is going to be acceptance and recognition of international laws and conventions, and India has always upheld the international laws and conventions. In fact, we have been the first off the block in signing on many international treaties and conventions, though we took 14 years to ratify. UNCLOS is another issue. But for the first time, when we looked at the High Seas Treaty that came in, we took a year to sign. But we have signed. So therefore, there is an approach to which we need to look at how things work out. And I think the growing nationalism and the search for resources, especially seabed, is actually going to make, I would say, a comprehensive approach to international laws and conventions as they progress in the years to come a little bit more difficult, because we are entering an area where nations who have the technology will definitely benefit. So if again, just give you the example of the US, I think it was last year in April where there was an executive order about seabed mining issued. So that raised a lot of, questions as to what is the US intentions, how do you go about it. And so when we speak about rules-based order, and Chatham House in 2015 had a very nice discussion, one of the pillars of a rules-based order is legitimacy. And that is where the powers that be who actually form rules-based order, ones who actually would say contravene it or go against it. So how do you establish this in international laws and conventions? We have varying interpretations. I mean, we have big differences with the US on UNCLOS, but we've put them aside many years back. It's not a simple answer I can give you, but I think it's, again, more important to understand what is the overall convergence point for the benefit of maritime security on the 3 pillars of stability, security, and peace.
Thank you. General Cordova, I'd like to go back to what you mentioned in your presentation about the upcoming Balikatan exercises. Apart from the participants, what can we expect from this year's exercises?
We are actually progressing. Before, the focus was just exercising some of the concept or of a defense of the Philippine scenario to include addressing contingencies like HADR. But right now, as we are expecting a number of participants from other countries, not only from the US, the focus now of our Balikatan exercises is to exercise or to address issues that will enable us to really operate together as a collective whole with of course our principal partners like the US, Australia, and Japan. And there are also, aside from live fire exercises that which we had before. We will also be testing new capabilities as well as looking at how to address critical gaps like sustainment or resilience issues or supply-related issues. So these are the minor details that are part of the exercises that will be executed in the next few weeks.
Thank you. General Padilla, you mentioned the importance of public-private partnerships and engaging with academia. I wonder if you can give us some insights about how governments can more effectively engage the private sector as partners and not just as stakeholders in safeguarding freedom of navigation.
Okay. So, from the private sector perspective, I think one of the best presentations this morning regarding that was made by the ambassador himself when he alluded to the strengthening of the resilience of the economic resilience of the region. Now, as far as the Philippines, Japan, and regional partners are concerned, in order for us to be able to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific, and strengthen our capacity to stand any kind of shocks is to help build up what I said, a strong and robust engagement with the private sector, academia, and the like. And in the private sector, the best incentive would be to assist them and motivate them to participate in building up the defense industrial base. Not only the Philippines, but also of Japan and our like-minded partners, because they play a very big role in the supply chain architecture that will help sustain any kind of reaction or proactive engagement during the events of a geopolitical world-changing event like what we're seeing in the Persian Gulf right now. So the private sector has a very robust participation in this kind of environment. Rest assured that many of the defense institutions themselves will facilitate or ensure that they are able to survive it or sustain their engagement going forward as a matter of action to the changes that are occurring. So incentivizing, motivating private sector to be part of the defense industrial base in many forms, like what is being done now. We've seen that there is a country that has a very big capacity to build ships on a fast rate, but the West is very way behind. That's why in the architecture of the maritime environment, mas lamang sila or they're ahead than any of us. So developing the participation of the business in the private sector, in shipbuilding, in ship repair, everywhere across the Indo-Pacific would be a plus, just as an example. Another thing that I could provide as an example is helping private sector be part of the protective umbrella that watches and monitors our undersea cables, because that is a very critical capacity of nations to be able to stay connected. But before a kinetic engagement happens, what I can say is that that is the first infrastructure that will be hit. And having the private sector and other sectors as part of the umbrella that watches and protects that architecture would ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific and increase its resilience.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I know that we still have a lot of burning questions in our heads, but our time is very limited. We have an upcoming coffee break, so I encourage you to please approach our speakers if you have any questions or concerns about any of the ideas that they have introduced to our panel today. We have another panel later on, so I hope we can continue this very engaging discussion. Please join me in thanking our panelists for this session.
Once again, let's give her another round of applause for a very comprehensive and interesting discussion. And may we request our panel to please stay on stage for a photo opportunity together with Professor Manhit, Ambassador Kazuya Endo, and Ambassador Yamada as well, please. All right, once again, thank you very much, Admiral Takei, Captain Parmar, General Cordova, General Padilla, and Dr. Willoughby. All right, and as Dr. Willoughby mentioned earlier, we're going to have a quick coffee break. We prepared coffee and snacks outside, but we hope you can come back to us at by 11:25. So we have, I think that's 15 minutes. We have 15 minutes for coffee and snacks. And to, if you want, also approach our speakers. But we hope to see you all again by 11:25. Thank you very much.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. I am Major General Fabian M. Pedregosa, the Commander, Strategic Command, Armed Forces of the Philippines.
May we request everyone to please settle down. We will soon begin our next panel discussion. Again, may we request everyone to please settle down. I would also like to call the attention of everyone who's still outside. May we invite everyone to please enter the ballroom for the resumption of our forum this morning. Again, may we invite everyone who's still outside to please come back inside for the resumption of our forum. Thank you. All right, I think we can already resume our session this morning. I understand that's a very short break. A lot of us want to catch up with our colleagues here. But don't worry, you'll have more time later during lunchtime. We'll have longer lunchtime. And we also prepared, I heard that lunch at 1 is very good. So that's something to look forward to. All right. So once again, welcome back. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Our next panel is entitled Enhancing Broader Cooperation in the Maritime Domain, Deepening and Updating the Free and Open Indo-Pacific. For our next panel, we are broadening the discussion beyond traditional maritime security cooperation pathways to reflect the wider strategic and economic dimensions of the maritime domain. So we will be exploring how key maritime issues such as the protection of critical supply chains energy flows, and undersea and digital infrastructure, alongside defense industry cooperation, can be integrated into maritime security partnerships to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific. So to begin our discussion this morning, we have our first speaker is Major General Fabian Pedregosa, Commander of the Strategic Command of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. General Pedregosa would have wanted to join us in person this morning, but he was unfortunately asked to brief the Secretary of Defense this morning. We were just informed on the ongoing situation in the Middle East, and we know how important that is right now. So but he did send us a video message for us to listen to this morning. And later on during the panel, AFP Deputy Commander of Strategic Command, Major General Thad Rufino Candelario, will be graciously joining us to answer your questions. So let us all listen in to the video message of General Pedregosa.
Distinguished guests, partners, colleagues, and friends, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. I am Major General Fabian M. Pedregosa, the Commander, Strategic Command, Armed Forces of the Philippines. First, please accept my apologies for not being able to join you today. I have an equally important activity that I need to attend to in GHQ. However, the brilliant Deputy Commander of Strategic Command, Major General Thad Rufino Candelario, is with you to answer all your hard questions. Thank you, General Thad. Also would like to thank Professor Dindo Manhit for this privilege of sharing my thoughts with you on the topic Strategic Areas of Cooperation to Advance a Free and Open Indo-Pacific in the perspective of the Strategic Command, Armed Forces of the Philippines. Let me begin in a simple way. For us Filipinos in the Philippines, the sea is personal. It is where our fishermen earn their living. It is how our islands are connected. It is how our trade flows. It is how energy and goods reach our people. As an archipelagic nation in the heart of the Indo-Pacific, we do not have the luxury of ignoring the maritime domain. Our geography demands that we pay attention. Our responsibility demands that we prepare. When we speak about a free and open Indo-Pacific, it can sometimes sound like a slogan, but in reality, it is very simple and practical. It means ship can sail without intimidation. It means aircraft can fly without harassment. It means disputes are settled peacefully. It means international law, not force, governs behavior. Today, the maritime environment is more complex than ever. In areas like the West Philippine Sea, we see increasing gray zone activities, maritime coercion, militarization of features, and advanced surveillance capabilities that can see almost everything that moves. Security at sea is no longer just about ships and sailors. It involves satellites, cyber networks, unmanned systems, data fusion, and alliances. That is why safeguarding the maritime domain is not something any nation can do alone. Let me share with you in a straightforward way the 4 areas where cooperation truly matters. First, strengthening defense partnership. Partnership matter. The Philippines has long-standing alliances and friendships, including our treaty alliance with the United States. We are also deepening engagement with partners like Japan and Australia, and working closely with ASEAN. Why does this matter? Because when nations train together, talk regularly, and plan together, misunderstandings are reduced. When partnerships are strong, deterrence is credible. Strengthening defense partnership means more than signing agreements. It means more meaningful exercises, real intelligence sharing, coordinated maritime patrols, honest strategic dialogue. For the past 2 years, we have strengthened our maritime cooperative activities with the United States, Japan, and Australia. Other nations are also showing interest in joining us. Last month, we participated in the STOP exercise with US in California. Also, just a few days ago, Stratcom had a very good discussion with Japan Joint Operations Command, and this will be followed by a meeting with their commander. We are also preparing for the AFP's participation in Pitch Black Exercise 2026 in Australia. All of these activities are intended to further deepen and strengthen our defense partnership with our allies and friends. Second, you cannot defend what you cannot see. Maritime domain awareness sounds technical, but it is very simple at its core. It means understanding what is happening on the surface, below the surface, in the air, in cyberspace, and even in space. At Strategic Command, we are working to integrate radar systems, air and naval patrol data, satellite inputs, and cyber intelligence into one coherent operational picture. But here is the most important part. Awareness must be shared. If we see something but our neighbors do not, the picture is incomplete. Real security comes when we build a shared understanding with partners. Modern technology allows us to detect patterns, identify unusual behavior, and respond more quickly. But the technology alone is not enough. Trust and cooperation make it effective. Visibility creates accountability, and accountability strengthens stability. Together with US, Japan, and Australia, we are working towards this direction to build a real-time common operational picture. Japan, through ATLA and JASDAP, are supporting us in improving our air surveillance system and future air operations capability. In addition, we are sending our officers and enlisted personnel to Japan to undertake courses regarding air defense, weapons control, and electronic intelligence. Third, improving interoperability. Interoperability is a big word for a simple idea. Can we operate together smoothly when it matters most? Strategic Command was established to prepare for the Armed Forces of the Philippines for multi-domain operations. Today's challenges do not stay in one domain. Maritime security is linked to air defense, cyber resilience, space-based systems, and information operations. Improving interoperability means compatible communication systems, integrated air and maritime coordination, joint planning processes, shared operational procedures. Exercises are not just for show. They are rehearsals for uncertainty. They build confidence, remove friction, and ensure that in moments of tension, we act with clarity rather than confusion. This year's Balikatan exercise will be the biggest so far, and with the highest participation of friends and allies all over the globe. All with the objective of improving interoperability with the armed forces of like-minded nations. For the first time, Japan is sending a contingent to participate in this year's Balikatan, and this will further improve our interoperability with them. Fourth, expanding cooperation in response to evolving challenges. Security challenges today are not only traditional military threats. We also face illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, maritime smuggling, environmental degradation, natural disasters intensified by climate change. These issues affect all of us. Cooperation among navies, coast guards, and law enforcement agencies builds habits of trust. Joint humanitarian assistance and disaster response exercises demonstrate that our militaries are also forces for good. A free and open Indo-Pacific is not about containing anyone. It is about preserving a system where all countries, large or small, can operate without fear. It is about rules. It is about respect. It is about predictability. What is the role of the Strategic Command? Strategic Command exists to think ahead. We anticipate emerging threats. We integrate capabilities across domains. We synchronize planning. We provide options to national leadership. We prepare not for yesterday's war, but for tomorrow's uncertainty. For the Philippines, our position is steady and calm. We seek peace. We uphold international law. We strengthen partnerships. We modernize responsibly. Matatag tayo, may prinsipyo, may dangal para sa ating karagatan, karapatan at kinabukasan. In closing, let me end on a simple note. The sea connects us. It should not divide us. If we strengthen partnerships, enhance awareness, improve interoperability, and expand cooperation, we can safeguard the maritime domain together. As Commander of Strategic Command, I assure you we will continue to plan, prepare, and partner to ensure that our maritime domain remains secure, stable, and open for generations to come. Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay ang ating bansang Pilipinas. Best regards to everyone. And at this point, I give the floor to Major General Tad Rufino Candelario to answer all your hard questions. Thank you very much. Thank you, Stratbase, and thank you to Professor Dindo Manhit. God bless to everyone.
All right. A round of applause, please, for General Pedregosa for a very informative speech. And as he said, we will have General Candelario later during the panel discussion to answer some of your questions. All right. Our next speaker for this morning is a distinguished fellow of the Asia Society Policy Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Mr. Danny Russell. Let's give him a round of applause, please.
Well, thank you all very much, and thanks particularly to Stratbase and to JIIA. I'm really happy to be back in the Philippines, and it's a thrill to see many of my old friends from both Manila and Tokyo. The Stratcom commander is a hard act to follow. He speaks so clearly and thoughtfully. I'm impressed, and I also don't have a beautiful PowerPoint to amuse you, I'm sorry. But this is a really meaningful topic to me because I served as President Obama's special assistant for Asia, and I worked directly with Prime Minister Abe and his government. And we centered our alliance on a rules-based maritime order in the East China Sea and the South China Sea, defending freedom of navigation, freedom of overflight, pushing for peaceful and law-based dispute resolution, and importantly, pushing back against coercion. Today, we're in a highly competitive environment, and maritime security isn't just undersea, it's not just maritime, it's not just ships, it's not just maritime law enforcement, it's economic security, it's cyber security. It now includes critical supply chains, secure energy routes, resilient undersea and digital infrastructure, the protection of offshore and undersea resources, defense industrial cooperation. We've heard a lot of insights on these areas from previous speakers. The maritime domain is a kind of circulatory system of the region. The ports, the undersea cables, the logistic hubs, the energy flows. These are major arteries, the lifeblood of Indo-Pacific security and, of course, Indo-Pacific, even global prosperity. So definitely the role of the United States remains indispensable for regional stability. But I'll be very direct. Many, if not most allies and partners of the United States have become quite anxious about the Trump administration's posture, the aggressive use of tariffs as leverage, other pressure tactics to extract concessions, to get investment, the heavy America first messaging and so on. These have made it hard to be confident that the rhetorical commitment by the United States to a free and open Indo-Pacific is really credible anymore, is sustainable anymore, is going to be enforced. And that skepticism, I think, is sharpened by the president's insistence that security allies and trading partners have basically been freeloaders, have taken advantage of the United States, that they need to pay more. They need to do what America wants them to do. In Washington itself, where I no longer live, I've moved back to New York, we see a sharp disconnect between a very transactional president who's focused overwhelmingly on deal making with China, and national security officials, the Congress, and much of the defense establishment who still see the Western Pacific as a vital national interest, people who are committed to maintain deterrence, to maintain maritime access, and resist the coercive behaviors in the South China Sea, East China Sea, Taiwan Strait. First and foremost is the Indo-Pacific Command, and their mission remains focused on the Western Pacific, of course. But the Trump administration's national security strategy and national defense strategy send mixed messages. They echo some of the traditional language on the Indo-Pacific, on deterrence, freedom of the seas, and so on, but they leave really big gaps by omitting any reference to, say, North Korea, or only barely, glancingly addressing Taiwan and the South China Sea. So I do not need to remind anybody here that in just the past month, US military attention and US military assets have been pulled dramatically towards the Middle East, towards Latin American theaters, and that drains badly needed resources away from the Indo-PACOM, and it fuels doubts about Washington's prioritization and Washington's staying power in the region. So I would say that today the American commitment to free and open Indo-Pacific is uneven. It's less visible at the political level and in the priorities of the current administration. And the net effect of this is that partners are forced to hedge. If Washington looks unpredictable, unreliable, distracted, countries are going to reduce risk by keeping other options open. And that can mean developing independent capabilities. It can mean self-censoring to avoid Chinese retaliation. And it can leave them in a position where they have to deal with China on a primarily bilateral basis, which puts them at, frankly, a disadvantage with such a large country. So the hedging has huge consequences, including for the United States. I've learned over a career as an American official, our strength is greatest when we are closely aligned with our partners to deal with challenges in the Indo-Pacific and around the world. I believe that the upcoming meeting in Washington with Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi and the upcoming meeting in Beijing with President Xi Jinping offer a kind of stress test of America's commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. In Washington, the president has an opportunity to showcase alliance unity, to show shared objectives, to show that Washington is fully committed to Japan's security. And in Beijing, the President has an opportunity to push back directly and clearly against Beijing's coercive campaign to target Japan, to target the Philippines, to target Taiwan. I'm not making a prediction, but the sooner the US restores a disciplined focus on FOIP, on free and open Indo-Pacific policies, the stronger our collective resistance to coercion is going to be, and the safer the Indo-Pacific region will become. So I'll stop there and look forward to the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Danny Russell. And our next speaker is Professor Ryasei Kokubun, former president of the National Defense Academy of Japan. Let's give him another round of applause, please.
Thank you very much. I'm so proud of being here. And my name is Ryosei Kokubun. And after serving, working as a university professor at the Keio University for 30 years, then I served as the president of the National Defense Academy of Japan for 9 years, starting in 2012. Well, I am a political scientist, mostly focusing on Chinese politics and foreign relations. Japan had many cadet schools before the World War II, but they were all abolished after the World War II. Only one new cadet school was established to train officers for the self-defense forces, Jietai, in the democratic era. That is this school. This is a graduation ceremony. I look quite young. But anyway, during my 10 years as president, I made official visit to military academies worldwide. In 2016, I officially visited the Philippine Military Academy, PMA, in Baguio City. The welcome ceremony they held for me, then it's unforgettable. They dedicated half a day of the school's schedule to my welcome ceremony with every faculty member and the students welcoming me. Slide 3. Next slide, please. At that time, I was honored to plant a tree in the center of the academic grounds. It was grown like this. Next slide. Next slide. Yes. 10 years. I've never been grown, but I'm aged, but my kids in Philippines is like this. I'm so proud of this. The exchanges between the Philippine Military Academy and the National Defense Academy began in 1992. To date, the NDA has already welcomed 35 Filipino graduates and current students. Security exchanges between the young people of Japan and the Filipinos have a long history and have steadily yielded result. We must continue to expand such an exchanges and deepen human connections. Now let me turn to my main topic. I'd like to briefly report on 3 topics. First, is China's the current domestic situation. The second is US-China relations, and third is Japan-China relations. Okay. The first, China's domestic politics. This is my specialty. Now, recently, the Xi Jinping has been purging close associates within the party and the government, primarily military personnel, as you may know. The two interpretations exist for this case. One suggests that Xi Jinping is purging, potentially threatening associates to consolidate his power. Now he is an extraordinarily powerful leader. This is one explanation. The other said that the factional struggles have emerged within the leadership over the issues like economic policies, US policies, and the succession issues. His power is not powerful than before. I believe the latter interpretation is rather correct. Well, of course, he has power, but particularly he's focusing on the police and propaganda. The Xi Jinping alone is most obsessed with the Taiwan unification. Having worked briefly in the military sector and spent many years working in the Fujian province, he seems to mistakenly believe he alone understands the military and the Taiwan very well. The Party Central Military Commission members who started in 2022 numbers 7, including Xi Jinping, but now only 2 remain with no replacement. I tell you, that is one of the best friends. Number 4 of the Communist Party. Used to be, not anymore. I invited him to Japan for 5 times. He was a visiting scholar at the Keio University too. But anyway. So, subsequently, the differences of opinion likely emerged within the military regarding US-China relations and the use of forces to unify Taiwan. Zhang Youjia, who was the second in command to Xi Jinping on the commission, was recently purged, having served in devastating the Sino-Vietnamese War in his youth. Zhang Youjia is believed to have opposed the use of force to unify Taiwan, recognizing military inferiority and advocating for the conciliation with United States. Regarding Xi Jinping's successor, it is said that that summer, Hu Zhenhua, the guy, exceptionally capable and enlightened figure, backed by the Hu Jintao and the late Li Keqiang, was nearly confirmed. However, these scenarios suddenly disappeared afterwards. The weakest point of Chinese politics is the lack of rules choosing political successors. If you look back at the history of succession politics in China, well, serious power struggles occur at every time. To conclude, I think the Xi Jinping's, that's his existence, is, I recommend him, he must retire soon, but anyway. He's the same age as mine. The second, the US-China relations. The President Trump is scheduled to make an official visit to China starting late March. Unexpected variables have emerged, the conflict between the US, Israel, and Iran. this situation will likely persist for some time. China imports oil from Iran, I think almost the entire, so probably 13 to 14%. I think Trump may go to China specifically to request China's probably mediation role with Iran. Japan's former Prime Minister Abe once played this mediating role. In 2019, at the President Trump's request, Prime Minister Abe visited Iran, met its leadership, and contributed to calming the nuclear issues. Unfortunately, Abe is no longer with us. So, unfortunately, Japan's relationship with Iran is weaker than before. This leaves China probably in a position well suited to act as a mediator now. Later this year, Chinese President Xi Jinping is scheduled to visit the United States. Therefore, this year could potentially be one of the US-China rapprochement in the region. Japan might not be overly pleased about the US-China rapprochement. However, I believe it could have a positive aspect too. At the very least, regional security could stabilize temporarily. And the biggest theme in US-China relations, a Taiwan contingency, seems unlikely to occur in the next few years. However, this may only last for a few years. And the situation could eventually become more serious after the Trump administration. Therefore, we cannot stop deterrence. China will never give up on unifying Taiwan and strengthening the military buildup. Third, the Sino-Japanese relations. On October 7, last year, Prime Minister Takaichi mentioned the possibility of Japan intervening in a Taiwan contingency within the context of a survival threatening situation, Sonritsu Kikijitai, stipulated under the right of collective defense. The Japanese government's usual position is that the first condition is the US intervention and the request to Japan, and that the Japanese government will make a decision on how to respond after comprehensively assessing the situation. Prime Minister Takaichi herself acknowledged she had spoken too much, but did not retract her remarks. China started criticizing the Takaichi government as militarist. I say China must learn from the Japanese lessons in the past. Now China is becoming militarist. Now China's intention, I believe, was twofold. One, first, to isolate Japan. The fourth, retraction of the statements. The second, to check the US reaction and drive a wedge between Japan and the US. The President Trump's response to Takaichi's remarks was rather ambiguous. However, Japanese public opinion actually grew more supportive of Takaichi, with approval now exceeding 70%. In other words, China's hardline stance actually increased support for Takaichi. Frankly, this makes a dialogue between Japan and China seem difficult for the foreseeable future. Honestly, I wish the United States would better understand Japan's position and offer more support. But everything ultimately depends on the President Trump's calculation. Next slide. Earlier this year, on January 16th, the New York Times they reported that the 2,000 Chinese maritime militia vessels had assembled in the East China Sea. This training, visual after the Takaichi's remarks, saw scattered fishing boats suddenly gather and align themselves toward Japan. The action wasn't pressure on Taiwan. It was actually close to the Japan's Senkaku Islands and Okinawa. There might be a possibility that China may become more offensive to the Senkaku issues. From this, it seems clear that the U.S. military presence in this region remains, of course, crucial. Of course, the dialogue between Japan and China is also essential to prevent crisis. Even Japan-China relations were strained over historical issues. Nevertheless, President Hu Jintao initiated the dialogue with the Prime Minister Abe and established a strategic and mutually beneficial relationship in 2006. We must never forget the dialogue in the most necessary during the difficult times. At the same time, cooperation and coordination between free and open countries is indispensable under such an unstable international order. In that sense, I'm sure that the security cooperation between Japan and the Philippines is an extremely important element, I think, for the stability in the Indo-Pacific region. I conclude my conclusion. The last slide. Yes, selfless service to God and country, honor and excellence. PMA's core values. That's important. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Kokubun. Our final speaker for this morning's panel is the former Vice Commander of the Philippine Navy and a non-resident fellow of the Chat-Based Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Rear Admiral Romel Judong. Let's give him a round of applause, please.
Mas-steep neck ako. Thank you, Joyce. Two caveats before I start. Number one, I'm just substituting for Dr. Chester Cabalsa. So, like studies answering the hard questions for Stratcom, refer the hard questions to Dr. Chester. Second, I'm not in government. Everything is my personal opinion. I have no idea what they're doing inside government. Next slide, please. So let's lay the predicate first. China's maritime strategy requires 3 axes of advance. And we look, by the way, this is standard lecture. No? I think half of the room already saw this before. And we look at Chinese maritime strategy in terms of 3 axes of advance and how it affects both the Philippines and Japan. This describes China's naval operational design as well as how it will support the Chinese Communist Party's political and economic objectives. For the Philippines, it sits astride 2 of the axes of advance, the middle one and the southern one, the southern part. Japan is affected by the northern axis of advance as China intends to advance towards the Arctic Ocean. By the way, I also use this slide to explain why Trump is fixated on Panama Canal and Venezuela. And this actually explains why he's in Iran right now. Okay. And the north one is why he's fixated in Greenland. Next slide, please. Now, the North, East, and South China Seas form a single maritime theater of operations. You cannot separate one from the other. There are many coastal archipelagic states surrounding these islands, but we only have one adversary, and that's China. And China looks at it as one single theater of operations. Unfortunately, we operate independent of each other, and we are operating in stovepipes. The Basi Channel is the likely decisive point for any naval conflict in the future, if any, involving Taiwan, which affects the Philippines. And the South China Sea, unfortunately, is not militarily defensible, okay, in case of conflict from a Philippine standpoint. In terms of using US valuation or the concept of value of the object, concept I got from the US Naval War College, there's nothing to die for in the South China Sea, okay, not the fish. So Philippine maritime defense posture needs to focus on developing the 7 slots that it has as kill zones. Next slide, please. So this is where we are currently. So we're looking at different situations that all of them can become flashpoints for any conflict at any given time. Note that I'm not talking only of maritime concerns, but rather things that are happening inland due to Chinese United Front work activities, which is not part of my topic. Next slide, please. Now, we cannot talk about defense industry if we do not understand what it is going to be used for. So I've tried to separate it in terms of peacetime tasks, and the next slide will be on the wartime tasks. So just on the peacetime tasks, I've listed some areas where defense industry or private sector can help in terms of capacity building our maritime security forces. So I'll just take an example. For example, if we want the Coast Guard and the Bureau of Fisheries to have sustained maritime presence in our exclusive economic zone, they need more ships. Okay? They don't need sophisticated ships. They just need more ships, okay, to be able to protect our fisher folks and all our economic activities in the West Philippine Sea. So the solution there would be, how do you develop now the domestic shipbuilding capability and ship repair capability through capital infusion and technology transfer? Second, I'll skip some of. Number 3, we need comprehensive maritime domain awareness. Okay. That means, unfortunately, not all commanders are intelligence officers. So you need data that is idiot-friendly so that normal commanders can appreciate them. Okay. So for normal commanders, you need to crunch that data in a way that they can make decisions faster. So the fusion of information, like for the naval intelligence, our sources of information come from ships, aircraft, coastal radar, and human resource. But you need to fuse them all together. It takes time to actually make an assessment. So you need an artificial intelligence overlay to crunch the data faster and make it accessible to the commander faster. Number 4, on space-based ISR. 10 years ago, the Navy, at least during my time, already made an assessment that we need to shift away from shore-based radar to space-based ISR. Why? We cannot fight the curvature of the Earth. Even if the mass of the radar is tall, it still is subject to physics. Okay? So we want to look at space-based ISR. So we sent actually 2 officers to train on nanosatellite technology, and they actually went to Japan and participated in the assembly and launch of the Maya satellite. Okay? So we're looking at microsat constellation. When you say constellation of microsats, you're going to deploy at least 6 to 8 microsats in space because they are not geosynchronous. Okay? So the Earth revolves, but the satellites are fixed. So that at any given time, you have at least 2 or 3 microsats overhead giving you ISR coverage. Okay? And Dr. Sese, one of the pioneers of space design, space studies, actually identified Mati Davao Oriental, that's in Mindanao, as the ideal launch pad for if we want to invest in space, commercial space activities. We need undersea sensors. We can monitor the surface, but we do not know how many submarines are lurking around Luzon Strait. Okay? So maybe this is an area, a gap that we need to fix. We need to monitor the Chinese Coast Guard and militia vessels. we need a non-kinetic response to Chinese gray zone tactics. I asked the Navy if we can look for an icebreaker that is no longer being used. Okay. Because icebreakers are good for dealing with militia vessels that want to ram it. Okay. Okay, next slide. So for wartime tasks, these are my wish list. Okay, we need to disrupt China's escalation dominance over the Philippines and develop strategic deterrence. Okay, so the U.S. deployed the Typhoon missile system. I think that's a good solution, but it's not ours. No country that is following the missile technology control regime will sell it to us, so we need to develop it on our own. Okay, anything that is over 300 kilometers will have to be developed here, because no country will sell it. Second, we need an asymmetric response to the PLA Navy Surface Force. That's why we went to buying the BrahMos anti-ship missile system. And also we need to look at undersea or surface drones. When we were discussing this, when I developed the Naval Capability Plan of 2016, we have a description for frigates. Frigates F, floating targets. Okay. And what happened in Sri Lanka, I think 2 days ago, reinforces that. So what is valid in 2016 is still valid in 2026. Frigates are floating targets. We need an asymmetric response to the CCG and militia vessels because BrahMos is very expensive. You do not use it to shoot a militia vessel that is very low cost. Okay. So may ROI din ang ano eh. Shooting missiles has a return on investment construct as well. We need to defend our 7 SLOCs and configure them as kill zones for asymmetric warfare. That means you need to focus on cheaper solutions, which is fast attack craft, drones, naval mines, short-range anti-ship missile system, and a local MDA capability. As I said earlier, the West Philippine Sea is not militarily defensible. The hard line for defense would be the 7 archipelagic strait. And of course, the submarine. They don't want to approve the submarine because it's very expensive. But what we discussed 10 years ago is still valid now. We were not buying the submarine just so it's nice to look at. It was supposed to sink Chinese commercial vessels. Because the economic center of gravity of China is maritime trade. 95% of China's trade goes by sea, and most of them pass through the Philippine archipelago. That is deterrence. Next. So I will answer some of the questions laid out that was sent to me by the staff. Okay, how can regional countries integrate defense-cooperate into the FOIP? We need to build on already what is existing. The Philippine, US, Japan trilateral commitments that we made during the time of President Biden can already be we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And if you look at those commitments, half of them is about economic resiliency measures. We need to expand coverage to other like-minded states, aside from the 3, and maybe look at Australia, Canada, South Korea, etc. What are the opportunities for defense industrial partnerships? We can have policy discussions with the Department of Defense to review the AP modernization law and SRDP law and see how it can be enabled to protect to involve the private sector to be globally competitive in the defense industry product. It cannot be, the market cannot be armed forces alone, the Coast Guard alone, or the National Police alone. It has to be globally competitive. Otherwise, it will not make money. If it doesn't make money, it's not an industry. It's a pet project. Or worse, it's a white elephant. Conduct a market studies to assess how to integrate defense industry supply chains between the Philippines, Japan, and other partners. Okay. To expand collaboration in terms of industrial zone, shipyard, sovereign drone capability. And lastly, consider investing in STEM education in the Philippines. So science, technology, engineering, math education in the Philippines, high school system, and maybe in the UP College of Engineering. Because we need the humanware more as well as the hardware. Next slide. How can the PPP contribute? Adopt the RICA Act. I posted this in the earlier discussion, I think with the Italian embassy. The RICA Act is the combating piracy mechanism. We can use that similar mechanism because it involves both private sector and government to address security of submarine cables. Because if you assess the posture in terms of submarine cable, most of the capabilities actually is not in government, it's in private sector. So how can cooperation framework be designed to ensure inclusivity, allow for capacity building in terms of tech transfer, human resource training, or joint research and development? Leveraging our economies of scale, establishing resilient supply chains, example, chips. When we made our study on sovereign drone capability for the Philippines, the gap is chips. We can produce the body here, we can produce anything, but the chips, Philippines doesn't have it. We need to harmonize regulatory protocols, export controls, acquisition, reducing barriers to new entrants. Okay. Business industry interoperability standards in terms of how to do business and how maybe simple as measurements of products and funding mechanisms. Next. What policy measures are needed to build a sustainable regional defense industry? We need to look at principle of complementarity and integration, a whole-of-nation approach between government, private sector, academia, civil society. I think General Padilla mentioned it earlier. Regional cooperation platforms, expand the trilateral arrangement to business industry. So the trilateral commitments we have was a product of discussion between national security advisors, defense ministers, and foreign ministers. Why not have the trade ministers part of the conversation as well? Or the economic development planners part of the conversation as well? Last slide na to. Teka, balik. Okay, what are the potential projects? Invest in capacity building programs. We look at shipbuilding and repair hubs and maritime domain awareness infrastructure, supply chain arrangements in complementary industries, and regional funding and risk-sharing mechanism to support maybe research and development. In the way I understand it, in the Armed Forces Defense construct, R&D is not part of the, not funded. So it's a thank you activity, okay? We need to invest more in research and development, otherwise we're gonna end up with products that doesn't work. So I think that's my last slide. Thank you, good morning.
All right, thank you very much, Admiral Ong. So at this point, we will now proceed to our panel discussion. May I invite back on stage Professor Kokubun, Mr. Russell, General Candelario, and also Admiral Ong. And moderating this session is His Excellency Takiyo Yamada, Executive Director of the Japan Institute of International Affairs Center for Global Outreach, and he is also a former ambassador of Japan to Vietnam. Let's all give them a round of applause, please.
So already good afternoon, everybody. And as time is pressing, and so I'd like to make it, candid and concise. But first I'd like to thank all the panelists who gave us, shared with us, some very rich and comprehensive perspectives of the fundamental issues we are now facing. And I'd like to start with asking two top and leading experts on the US policy, foreign policy, and China, Mr. Russell and Mr. Kokubun, about the geopolitical questions of the region, because the security of maritime domain in the region is so much related to the power politics and geopolitics of the region now going on. And Ambassador Russell gave us very clear perspectives of what's going on in the United States and the foreign policy community. And I actually listened to it very carefully, and I enjoyed it. But still, I have many questions about the trajectory of the present US administration. So I make it very short. Dr. Russell, can we count on the commitment, security commitment of the United States under the current administration? Number two, what will be the expected outcome of President Trump's visit to China later this month and early next month, particularly on the issue of Taiwan? Please give your perspective on these fundamental questions.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Yamada. On the first question, I would say that the reassuring part of the equation is that, first of all, the national security infrastructure within the United States, in the government, in the Congress, public, remains deeply committed to the American role of providing security and maintaining long-term stability, and would be quite resistant to compromises reached by President Trump in Beijing that ceded control or hegemony of Asia to China. The president would be swimming against a very strong tide in the United States. That said, of course, he has a record of ignoring the conventional wisdom or the traditional views of the professionals. But there's a second factor, which is that as much as President Trump may focus on commercial advantage and gain, one of the things that is critically important to him is the appearance of strength. And I don't see President Trump acceding to an agreement or allowing the visit to unfold in a way that makes him look weak. In fact, there is, if anything, the opposite problem, which is I think that the recent spate of US military attacks, the extraordinary operation that captured Venezuelan President Maduro, and now the dramatic assault on Iran, may well convince President Trump that he is going to Beijing from a position of great strength and has new leverage over Xi Jinping by virtue of intimidation. It defer to Professor Kokubun, but it may be that the opposite is true, and that the net effect of the recent attacks is simply to convince or reinforce Xi Jinping's conviction that he can't trust the United States. He can't allow any vulnerabilities or dependencies on the US, and that he has to dramatically strengthen China's own defenses and capabilities. And this is layered on top of a long-standing sort of Leninist conviction that the American system is in decline, that it's highly polarized, and so on. Now, the last thing I would say is that all of the indications are that President Trump goes to Beijing very focused on limited commercial deals, sales of commodities, transactions with Boeing planes, and so on. that he and Xi Jinping, for their own reasons, are interested in sustaining or extending the so-called truce on tariffs, truce on critical mineral export bans. There's a fair amount of talk about some limited investment regime that would allow Chinese money to flow into the United States under certain conditions. But these are issues that don't go to the heart, the structural problems that the US and China face, and neglecting those problems is dangerous in the extreme. And secondly, the emphasis on stabilizing things, stabilizing the relationship while better than the alternative, is deeply flawed because stabilizing isn't the same as stability. It doesn't create equilibrium, it postpones the inevitable, and it is driven in part by the desire on the part of both the United States and China to use this breathing space to strengthen our respective capabilities so that we can resume the conflict in a more dominant position.
Well, thank you very much. And I think it has been made very clear by your statement, but still, stability and stabilizing are different. And so we have to be very curious about the delicate implications that it may have for all of us. And next time, can I ask Professor Cockburn, first, I'm so much appreciative of your very fundamental and very deep insights about what's going on in China. And in particular, among all the very important messages, I heard very carefully that you said that after the visit by President Trump, Taiwan situation, you are not expecting the contingency in the near future. That's what I understood. And that's actually a very important aspect because some people say that the next year, 27, will be very critical for the Taiwan issue. So could you share with us your understanding and perspectives, why you believe that contingency over Taiwan is getting less likely in terms of the domestic politics of China and their foreign policy?
Thank you. Two reasons. First, if you look at the history of U.S.-China relations in the past, particularly after the post-war period, but the main issue was, of course, the Taiwan issue. Started since 1950s, and I think this time the rapprochement is going to be happening. That means, of course, this rapprochement, well, of course, mutual distrust, that's never changed. But they have to associate and negotiate it together. Why? Just like the Cold War period, U.S.-Soviet relationship, distrust each other. But they started negotiation because they have distrust. That this time, I think probably that issue was nuclear issues based on. But this time, probably economy. And the interdependence each other, they cannot break each other. So that means the U.S.-China with distrust, but negotiation and dialogue. So I think if the Taiwan contingency happens, China invaded Taiwan, of course, U.S. got angry, and the U.S. loses their faces. So that means that probably it's difficult for starting the invasion by Chinese military in a foreseeable 1 or 2 years. But probably another Trump administration in the next 3 years, probably being quiet. But in the meantime, China's military build-up will be more. And then the second reason is the domestic Chinese situation. I think of first economies like this. And then, as I said to you in my presentation, now the China is the military personnel, military commission. Only two out of 7. How you manage the military? And most of the people, the purged mostly from the military sectors. How you manage, right? So I think it's almost the lack of the leadership, particularly on the military sectors. I don't think it's possible. But as I told you, we have to prepare for the next time. Of course, China will. This time the 7% increase, right? That's a tremendous increase. 5 more times than Japanese defense spending. That's really something. So we have to prepare, and we need of course, we have to consider about the deterrence against China. That's true. Never changed. But of course, one thing, the Taiwan issue, the Xi Jinping's main topic, right? Only he is thinking, probably, very seriously. So that means, Xi Jinping, the leadership, will continue forever? Well, I have a strong doubt. I have a strong doubt. Already 13 years passed. I think, still, of course, a very complicated situation is going on in the Chinese politics. But Xi Jinping's leadership is not forever. That's my conclusion.
Well, thank you very much for your very profound insights about Chinese politics. And well, your explanation gave us some time, but not a relief. And so we have to advance the cooperation among like-minded countries very steadily.
Yeah.
And my next question goes to Major General Candelano. And Major General Pedrogosa gave us a very eloquent and clear views about the strategic policy of the Philippines Armed Forces. And he mentioned 4 pillars of cooperation. Yeah. And I was particularly interested in his reference to maritime domain awareness, because that actually directly related to the theme of this symposium. And particularly, as Admiral Takei mentioned, that maybe intelligence cooperation would be getting more and more important and imminent challenge for us. And as we provided the radar system to you by OSA, and so could you give us your prospect and your ideas how we should advance and proceed the cooperation in maritime domain awareness?
Okay, very simply put, mechanisms, enabling mechanisms are agreements. Example, we've got the General Status of Information Sharing Agreements with the US. And as mentioned by the J5, I think that was Tuesday, meeting between Japan, Australia, Philippines, and the US was done, and we started talking about how we can mechanisms to enable that. So first is ensure that the policy mechanisms to enable information sharing happens. The next one is we will have to make sure the right information is shared. We agree, as mentioned by our earlier speakers, convergence on what relevant information should be shared. So next one is convergence. The third one, most important, the networks that enable sharing at the level we want, the resolution we want, should be established. So I think the talks conducted by the J5 on maritime domain awareness, the air picture, surface picture, subsurface picture, even the electronic warfare situation across the South China Sea has to be shared. And we're starting out. The important questions were asked this Tuesday, and I think we're moving forward. I had the opportunity to talk to our J3 counterpart from the JJOC, Japan Joint Operations Command. And from the start of a simple handshake and spending 1 hour together and then talking about how we can operate better. It means planning together better, sharing information, and then working together to achieve our both common end states. That's going to be the most important thing to do. So for maritime domain awareness, it's going to be information sharing. And we're already talking about the mechanisms to get that done. Succeeding to that will be the technical solutions to get information together so that we will have unified action. So thanks a lot, sir, for the question. I hope I clarified the matter.
Thank you very much for your very clear and logical explanation. Just I'd like to draw your attention to the priority initiative by Prime Minister Takaichi. That is comprehensive reform of the intelligence system of Japan. So this gives us a good opportunity for the cooperation between Japan, the Philippines, and Japan and like-minded partners of the region. So my last question goes to Major General Om. And thank you very much for your very comprehensive explanation of the potential areas of the cooperation for defense industry. And well, actually, that's also a priority area of Prime Minister Takaichi's initiative. We are trying to promote and enhance the capacity of cooperation by our defense industry. And so this is a very right moment and timely moment for advancing the cooperation between Japan and the Philippines. And you give us a very comprehensive views that we can't do everything by one shot. And so could you give us some of your priorities? What you are trying to do with Japan particularly, or maybe US and other partners in the near future? What is your immediate interest?
I think the immediate interest with respect to West Philippine Sea, South China Sea, is how to contest Chinese maritime presence in our waters. And as I said earlier, the Coast Guard needs more ships. But getting ships from Japan is good, but it's not sustainable with the requirement. So we have, the Philippines has a shipbuilding industry, but it just needs to level up in terms of modernization, capacity building, and human resource development. So if the Philippines can build its own ships, and I think the Bureau of Fisheries source its ships locally, then it can be competitive. We don't have to rely with other countries. We have shipyards in Subic that was bought by Cerberus, US firm, formerly from South Korea. I think it can expand its operations more. It can do shipbuilding also. We have Tsunesi here in Cebu, but it's more for commercial. So the capacity is there, human resource there. So we just need to tweak it a bit so that it can actually address the maritime requirements of our agencies here.
Well, thank you very much. And we are actually having a very intensive discussion on shipbuilding with the United States at the moment. Well, there's actually a lot of discussion going on within Japan on this industry. And so that may give a chance for furthering the cooperation with the Philippines too. That's my impression. Thank you very much. And there are so many questions, even I myself have, but now already time has passed 30 minutes. And so may I just ask you to just, pose your questions over lunch. Lunch is ready. And so I'd like to stand between you and lunch. So if I'm permitted, may I just conclude this exciting discussion? And we wish to continue this discussion over the lunch. So please give a big applause to all the excellent, distinguished panelists of today's session. Thank you very much indeed.
Please stay on stage. All right. Thank you very much to our panel. And please stay on stage for a quick photo opportunity. All right. Okay. All right, once again, let's give a round of applause for our panel. Professor Kokubun, Mr. Russell, General Candelario, Admiral Ong, and of course, Ambassador Yamada for that very comprehensive discussion, sir. Thank you very much. All right, so as we close today's forum, let me call on once again His Excellency Takio Yamada to give us his closing remarks.
Well, thank you very much indeed. And I will try to be very short. And first, I'd like to express our deepest thanks and appreciation for all those who helped us to organize this very excellent and very substantial symposium. And thanks to you, all of you, it was proven that free and open Indo-Pacific, this concept is still very important and relevant. And leveraging the 10th anniversary of the FOIP, after it was announced by Shinzo Abe 10 years ago, we have to evolve this concept as a basis of cooperation of the like-minded countries in the region, and update and deepen the concept, taking account of the challenges we are facing now. That's my actual impression. And I'm so glad. And as Ambassador Endo referred to, I'd like to once again introduce to you that Prime Minister Takaichi delivered an address at the Japanese National Diet last month. It was a very powerful address. And she emphasized the importance of the concept of free and open Indo-Pacific. And she committed to promote the leadership of Japan to achieve even more resilient and prospering Indo-Pacific. I share it with you. And so Japan Institute of International Affairs, I'm now representing that, will organize a series of opportunities to discuss the ways forward, ways to deepen and evolve the concept of FOIP for this year. And this is the first major step of our initiative. And I'm so appreciative of everybody, and because we can conclude this very important symposium with a great success. Thank you very much indeed.
All right, thank you very much, Ambassador Yamada, and thank you as well, Ambassador, for allowing us to partner with you in this very important forum, as you mentioned. All right, so I think we have reached the end of our program. Today's exchanges were a good reflection of our shared commitment to a stable and prosperous Indo-Pacific, as well as our collective determination to move from dialogue to action, to bring this vision to reality. So once again, thank you very much for joining us this morning. But don't leave yet. We prepared lunch. We have lunch outside, so please feel free to enjoy what we have prepared for you guys. And that's it. I am Joyce Reyes. We hope you have a good rest of the day. Thank you.